Ban Yu-1 was born with the incredible ability inherited from his ancestor. He is able to understand any language. When he became an adult, he discovered that he could also absorb someone's skills just by touching. His grandfather always said that they were descendants of the people who built the Tower of Babel. According to the prophecy, one day a genius would be born who could retake this tower. The grandfather believed that Ban was this genius since he was a child, but the protagonist and his family did not believe this story, until one day while waiting for the university acceptance grade, he was summoned and transported to a secret academy. It is there that he finds the legendary Tower of Babel. Ban finally believes in his grandfather and decides to fulfill his ancestor's goal. The story begins with our protagonist Ban Yu-1. When he was 4 years old, the mother comments in a humorous tone that the son is already reading a book. The father replies that he is very intelligent, but the mother thinks that he was the one who taught the boy to speak these words. Suddenly the protagonist starts speaking another language, and his parents are terrified. The father asks how Ban is speaking a language they have never even seen. At that moment someone enters the house saying that Ban inherited the lineage of his ancestor. This guy is the grandfather of the protagonist, and he is carrying his little sister under his arm. He celebrates that a genius was finally born to conquer the Tower of Babel back. The protagonist's family are skeptical. They are already tired of this Tower of Babel nonsense. The mother calls her daughter Yumi and asks if she had fun with her grandfather, while the father warns the old man that he should take a shower first when he returns from the farm. The grandfather is stressed because no one believes that it was his ancestors who built the Tower of Babel. At that moment the old man decides to explain the story to little Ban. He takes his notebook and starts to make some drawings. The grandfather explains that the great ancestor of his family had an ability that allowed him to communicate with all living beings. With this power he led large groups, and together they built a tower that no one can ever destroy. This tower is the Tower of Babel. Ban was just a little boy who believed in his grandfather, but was upset when he found out that the old man did not know the location of this tower. The man promised that one day they would find and recover all the power of his family. When Ban was a child, his grandfather told many stories about the adventures of this ancestor. The protagonist felt that he really had a linguistic ability. His parents did not interfere much because they believed that Ban had fun with the old man's stories. But then the protagonist grew up and realized that that story was too crazy to be true. A few years pass and the scene changes for Ban, sitting in front of the computer waiting to be accepted into a university. His goal was to study political science. He was angry because the results still didn't come out. Deep down the boy was sure he had passed. Suddenly the computer goes off the page and some strange things appear. Ban approaches to see what happened. A blue screen appears in front of the computer in another language. He realizes that it is a different language and still manages to decipher it. The message on the screen congratulated the protagonist for passing the best academy in the alternate dimension. The boy is surprised that he can read this language. The next moment another blue screen appeared informing that Ban will be teleported to the place of practical evaluation. A countdown starts from 10 seconds. The protagonist ends up thinking it's a prank and his sister Yumi was behind it. He couldn't think of someone else to play this kind of prank. Suddenly, an acceptance letter arrives from the university on his computer. Ban can't contain the happiness of having been accepted. The countdown ends. The protagonist believes that this blue screen is a thing of his imagination, due to the mental fatigue he has gone through in the last few days. Suddenly a blue light covers the boy and he disappears without a trace. In this moment someone knocks on the door and enters. It's his sister Yumi. She looks around and doesn't find the protagonist. Meanwhile Ban is teleported and falls into a somewhat dark place. The system warns that the special exam has started for the candidate from a lower dimension. The protagonist feels his headache from the fall and thinks it's too real for an illusion. Another blue notification appears in front of him with the following mission. He must defeat the blind goblins and destroy the core of the dungeon. Ban holds his head in denial, asking when he signed up for something like this. Suddenly a noise is heard behind him and the boy turns around. The blind goblins realize they have an enemy. They talk to each other in a language of their own, but for some reason the protagonist understands everything the monsters are saying. He puts his hand to his mouth so no noise escapes, then thinks it's better to try to get away from here before these things start attacking. Suddenly the goblins separate and start hitting with the bat in all directions. One of these blows almost hits Ban. He realizes that it could be fatal if it was hit. The protagonist begins to take distance. He believes he can get rid of these monsters because they can't see, but suddenly the boy ends up making noise. The goblin runs towards him and the blow grazes his face. Ban falls to the ground and is in total silence. The first goblin asks what happened. The second replies that he heard a sound coming. From this side, he adds that the enemy must still be here. The protagonist is horrified, realizing that even if these guys are blind, they easily identify any sound and movement. Ban realizes that there is no way to continue hiding because he will be found anyway. He immediately has an idea to distract these monsters and buy time. The boy then takes a rock next to his body and throws it in front of the goblins in an opposite direction to his. Without thinking twice, the monsters go towards the noise. It is at this moment that the protagonist attacks from behind using a stone. The goblin notices that the prey is behind and runs towards him, but ends up accidentally hitting his partner. The first goblin takes a fatal blow to the head and falls on top of the second. The protagonist observes the scene. The second goblin realizes the mistake he made. Ban approaches him with the wooden club in hand. He apologizes and says that he is doing this to survive. The next moment he destroys the second goblin. The bodies begin to disappear and the system congratulates him on the first hunt. As a reward, he received the power of the upper dimension. Ban looks scared. A yellow light surrounds his arm. Then the system says that the power of the Babylonian code has been unlocked. This power will be displayed using ideogram. Ideogram is basically symbols that represent concepts of things. The system adds that the concepts of monsters are being absorbed into it. The protagonist finally realizes his new ability. In addition to deciphering any language, he can also extract concepts from things. The system says that concepts have been copied. It is recommended to store or separate this in the Babylonian code. After applying it to the statistics, Ban decides to absorb the concept for himself. After doing so, he says that he already feels more confident. The system says that the boy will get stronger. Ban begins to feel an aura fill his body. He actually feels stronger when absorbing the concepts of these goblins. The protagonist looks around, noticing that the monsters disappeared after they had their abilities absorbed. Ban also realizes that in addition to absorbing the concept for himself, he can also apply it to other things, such as objects, for example. The protagonist finally feels safe and begins to use the concepts to create a weapon. A few hours later, Ban clears the dungeon of the blind goblins with the help of an artifact created by himself. The boy delivers the core to the system, which congratulates him for passing the practical test of the special dimension exam. Lower, the protagonist breathes a sigh of relief and asks if he can finally go home. The system replies that the candidate will be transferred to the dormitory. Ban initially thought he would go home if he made it out of the dungeon alive, but in fact he was sent to a world he had never seen before, an academy called Union. At that moment, Ban falls into his dorm, totally bewildered. The system asks him to put on his uniform and attend the interview. The protagonist complains, saying he didn't want to study here, he wanted to return home. A moment later, the boy puts on his uniform. He goes towards the interview room, determined to demand his teleportation back to the house. Suddenly, Ban opens the door and comes across a green woman. He thinks she is beautiful, but wonders if she is an alien. The woman welcomes her and introduces herself as Yamina, magic combat teacher at Union Academy. Ban is embarrassed. Yamina congratulates him on passing the exam. She explains that Ban has caught the attention of all the superiors. He is the first student in 500 years to create a new artifact during the evaluation. The protagonist listens to it in silence. Yamina applauds his intelligence. Ban doesn't think this is something impressive, but he believes that the difference between them is the world they came from. Maybe for the woman it was a great victory. Suddenly something catches his attention, and he looks out the window. Ban soon asks the teacher what that huge tower is. Yamina heard that people from lower dimensions have never heard about the Union Academy or about this tower. With this question from the protagonist, she concludes that it is true. The teacher then explains that this tower is the reason why the Union Academy was created. They teach the students with the greatest talents in all dimensions and help them to reach the top of this tower. This is the only objective of the Union Academy, to beat the dungeon that is the origin of all the mysteries and dangers of this world. Yamina finally replies that this tower is the Tower of Babel. The protagonist is surprised, and the first thing that comes to mind is his grandfather. The old man has always told stories about this tower, and about how his ancestors were responsible for creating it, but something still didn't make sense in Ban's head. He didn't understand why the teacher referred to the tower as the most powerful dungeon. The boy wondered if the tower was taken over by monsters. Anyway, it was something that couldn't be answered now. That tower made the protagonist enroll in the Union Academy. His goal became to fulfill his ancestors' wish and regain the glory of his family. After that day, the protagonist was sent back home and was able to explain to his family the reason for his sudden disappearance. The grandfather was shocked that he had finally found the Tower of Babel, while his father only supported him to do what had to be done. A few days pass. Ban was already a student within the Union Academy. At that moment he was fighting in the lower dungeon, called Goblin Cave. The protagonist was already able to cast spells and had a greater understanding of his abilities. Now only one attack was needed to decimate a large group of goblins. The Babylonian Code was the most incredible power Ban could have. Thanks to this ability, the protagonist could absorb and manipulate the concepts of all monsters. When an enemy is defeated, his concepts can be absorbed by Ban. After doing this, the protagonist can use it on himself or imbue the statistics in any object he wants. It was thanks to this that the protagonist created his first artifact. In that first dungeon he fell. His weapon was a bat with iron spikes, fatal for low-level monsters. Ban always imbued the concepts of the goblins and the artifact got stronger and stronger. At that moment the protagonist calls the system. He wants to know what new concepts he got from these monsters. A different statistic appears in the system called soul. The boy wonders what this means. The bat starts to get excited and the protagonist asks if he wants this concept. The artifact responds positively, so Ban agrees and decides to imbue this statistic. A very powerful light surrounds the weapon. The system informs that the combined concepts form a perfect harmony, causing a transformation in the artifact. The next moment an explosion happens and the protagonist covers his face. The weapon's stats are increased. Ban realizes that his weapon is now a snake. He tries to approach with his hand and is afraid that his new artifact will not recognize him, but she is able to identify its owner. The protagonist realizes that his personality is the same as before, but now has doubts if the artifact can still turn into a magic weapon or shield. The snake wraps it in his hand and Ban decides to give it a name. He says that she will be called Eve, then decides to check if her stats have increased. Ban observes the board in front of him with his own information. The life stat seems to be a concept similar to the level in a game. The flesh seems to represent physical stats, but what the protagonist doesn't understand is why the soul stat is so high. He still doesn't understand all the names in that painting, so he assumes what each one means. Below he comes across some of his abilities. The first is called all-seeing eyes, the second is called all-hearing ears. The protagonist thinks that these abilities are probably related to language skills. After that, he turns to Eve and asks if she thinks she's capable of surprising everyone now. The snake responds negatively with his head. Ban replies that everything is fine and presses the teleport button. He reappears in the auditorium of the Unio Academy, where the entrance ceremony is taking place. All the students gather. The protagonist is shocked by the amount of people. At that moment he activates his ability called All-Seeing Eyes, which allows the user to understand the aura and strength of a target in a deeper way. That's when Ban realized that all those students were extremely strong. Unlike the protagonist who entered through a lower dimension, these regular students went through another selection process to enter the academy, but this is not something that makes the protagonist afraid. At that moment he tries to find his place in the auditorium. Suddenly someone yells at Ban and he turns around trying to understand what happened. The frog guy orders the protagonist to leave the upper dimension because he is from a lower dimension. Ban quickly obeys and starts to get out of there. This discrimination of the students who went through the regular process was expected by Ban. He already knew that these guys were going to think they were better than those who came from a lower dimension. Our boy keeps walking by the students when someone calls him. He then sees his roommate called to a slight, who also came from a lower admission. Ban approaches and realizes that the students from lower dimensions are well exiled. The chairs are far from the rest of the students. At this point the protagonist uses his skill and is surprised. The rank of these students does not seem to be from a lower dimension. Ban believes that they are strong enough to destroy those regulars. He soon tells his roommate that these places are amazing. A slight does not understand if it is irony. A slight is the roommate that Ban met in the dorm before the entrance ceremony. In the first meeting they had, the protagonist was threatened with a sword. After a slight conversation finally understood that the boy was his roommate. They then talked about how was the training to enter the academy. The friend learned that the protagonist went through a goblin dungeon. He thought it was something very easy to do, but we all know how much the protagonist took the first dungeon. A slight says that even a new recruit with basic training could hunt a goblin easily. Ban looks silly hearing this. After the conversation, the protagonist remembers that he arrived from training and didn't go to take a shower. Then he starts to take off his shirt to go to the bathroom, but his friend has a slightly strange reaction, as if he is embarrassed to see his body. It was not the kind of reaction Ban expected to see from a male roommate. The scene returns to the current moment in the auditorium. Ban starts to greet the girls next to a slight. He can't look much at the girl with pink hair because he thinks she's too cute. She quickly turns her face embarrassed. The girl with the black eye looks at Ban in a different way, causing the protagonist to be embarrassed. She soon asks what this thing on her arm is. Ban realizes that Eve has been discovered and then decides to show her. The three of them are in awe of the snake. A slight realizes that this is the same artifact as before. He was surprised that it has changed so much in just a few days. The girl with pink hair asks to touch her because she thought it was too cute. The black-eyed one gives a satisfied smile and introduces herself as Dakoyun, daughter of a martial artist, then asks the protagonist what her name is. He introduces himself as Ban Yuwon. The protagonist sits next to her and asks if a martial artist likes to let out explosions. This question makes the girl very embarrassed and lowers her head. She tries to answer that he's not totally wrong. The pink-haired girl tries to get out of this subject a little and also introduces herself. Her name is Ruchel. A slight also introduces herself and says that everyone can just call him Light, which is his nickname. Yun turns his head and Light doesn't understand what happened. The protagonist soon warns that the ceremony is about to begin. He soon sees Professor Yamaina sitting next to the other superiors. The friend asks if the protagonist passed by Professor Yamaina when he arrived here. Ban answers yes and asks if he does too. Suddenly the conversation is interrupted by a light. At that moment the ceiling of the auditorium opens and an overwhelming pressure enters involving all the students. Everyone tries to cover themselves and no one goes unscathed, not even the special student. Soon they hear an oppressive voice thanking everyone for their presence. Then this person says that he is going to start another entrance ceremony of the Unio Academy. A little later the teacher Yamaina meets with the protagonist and his classmates. She asks if they also found the principal's speech impressive. The students are silent. Ban then asks if that giant eye is the principal. Yamaina is surprised to hear this and questions if he could really see that eye. Ruchel says that most people are too intimidated to even look up. Yun looks at Ban believing that he used some kind of special method. The protagonist tries to disguise what he said and says that in fact he didn't see anything. He just felt a big eye looking at him. Yamaina replies that anyway they won't see the director again unless it causes problems. She then approaches the protagonist and asks if he wants to have a conversation with the principal. Ban replies that this seems like a curse. The teacher laughs and soon advises the group to be the best. She says that the victory of her students is very important to her. Light asks if Yamaina will be responsible for them, and she replies that that's right. Light is surprised. The teacher decides to formally introduce herself to everyone. She says that her name is Yamaina and she teaches magic combat. The teacher adds that she has been assigned as the head of her waist class, which is class 11, so from today they will work together for the next 5 years. Light asks if the lower level special admission students should not be assigned to associate professors. Yamaina replies that normally that's right, but they are such special students that she was assigned to take care of them. At that moment, the teacher takes a cup of tea and the tone of her voice changes. She then advises the boys to be careful with regular admission students. Ban observes the teacher's words and realizes that she is referring not only to grades and practical classes, but also to confrontation. Physical and teasing fights between students. Matters outside of internal competition is something that not even teachers can interfere with. Yamaina says that from now on the 4 of them must stay together. They are rare students with lower-level special admission. Yun is still thinking about the hostility that the teacher spoke of. She is not sure if she can hold her own in a confrontation against these regular. At this point, the teacher gives another very important information. She says that the 4 are also members of the group that will climb the tower together until graduation. Ban thinks about it. The teacher smiles, saying that they have talked a lot and now she needs to give a small gift that the academy has prepared for them. A strong light emerges among the group of students. Yamaina adds that she will explain the rules and details after receiving this artifact. A little later the group held a pendant in their hands. The teacher explained that this will serve as a student ID card to identify and access all the details of the students. The group can also use this pendant to teleport to any place within the Unio Academy. At this moment the students look at the pendant thinking about what they are going to do. The magic of teleportation is what impresses everyone the most. Light then points out that they will need to keep this stupid pendant if they want to enter the tower. Whether they like it or not, they will need to take good care of it. Ruchel soon asks why the protagonist was left behind. Yun replies that there is no way to know until they meet him. The girl feels internally that there is something strange. After all, in the middle of the conversation, the teacher received a call and Ban was the only one selected to leave the room. The scene changes to the protagonist sitting in a chair without understanding why he is there. The boy starts to sweat cold because he knew he was going to have a private conversation with the director. He doesn't understand what he may have done wrong for this to happen on the first day. Suddenly a voice says that the boy doesn't need to be afraid to look at his true form. The protagonist looks up towards the voice and all he sees is a bear in front of him. He doesn't believe that this is the principal. A voice then says that the protagonist can call him master. Ban agrees. The principal then says that he doesn't normally interfere with the growth of the students. If they are weak, they will remain weak. If they are strong, they will remain strong. It is also not important to him whether the students will remain alive or not when they climb the tower. His goal is just to witness with his own eyes the one who reaches the end of the tower. The protagonist looks at the bear without much expression and remembers everything he heard from his grandfather when he was a child. The old man always said that his family was the only one who could rescue the tower. He remembers the day he entered the academy and found out about the Tower of Babel. It was when he promised that he was ready to risk his life and recover his family's honor, but now that he has seen the number of students who also want this, he may have been a little confused. At this point, the protagonist calls the master and asks what exactly the tower is. The director replies that the tower is the path to the divine. Ban is surprised. The master repeats what he said at the beginning about not interfering in the lives of the students, but today he will make an exception, because he was able to see in the protagonist the greatest potential that has ever stepped into this academy. The bear then raises his arm and an atmosphere spread throughout the room. Suddenly something invades that pendant that Ban received from the teacher. The master says that he will make some preparations to help him prepare to climb the tower. He reveals that he has expanded his exploration privileges outside the academy. This means that from now on the protagonist can travel to any dungeon, so Ban must make sure to hone his skills before climbing the tower. The boy tries to understand everything that is happening. The director then opens a portal under his feet and says that if Ban makes any progress, he will unlock the next privilege for him. Before being teleported, the protagonist asks what kind of privilege. The DM replies that maybe a solo exploration of the tower. Ban falls into the hole. The director says he is looking forward to the next meeting. Suddenly the protagonist falls into the teacher's arms. The woman asks curiously how the meeting with the director went. Ban realizes that he is close to her melons and quickly walks away. Yamina says that the director always dismisses visitors like this. One day he will get used to it. She takes a look at Ban's pendant and realizes that he has been given permission to leave the academy. The protagonist says that the headmaster told him to quickly improve his skills. Yamina says that this is a big deal. Now he can freely explore the outer dungeons outside the tower and can visit outer towns at will. This also means that Ban will gain much more experience and preparation than the others. To be honest, at first the protagonist did not understand that the director saw ability in him. In fact, the boy thought he was so weak that that's why he was getting supplementary classes. Teacher Yamina soon says that she is jealous. Teachers are usually too busy to go around. Ban asks if it's true. She replies that the Unio Academy is designed for the students, so the teachers should be in charge of providing everything they can to them. Now she's jealous because the protagonist will be able to leave the academy and even visit stores. The teacher then approaches Ban's face and says that there is a beautiful outdoor city that she can recommend. Her name is Ronica. The protagonist feels a little embarrassed and asks if he should bring her something from there. The scene changes to a little later. Ban is walking outside the gym. He remembers that the teacher asked him to bring 2 bottles of wine called Honeymoon. It is made by the priests of the temple. Ban did not expect that the teacher would ask a student to bring alcohol to the gym. Anyway, this is not something that needs your attention now. At that moment, the boy takes a deep breath, thinking that he should use the privileges to his advantage. He then opens the inventory and realizes something. The bag that his grandfather gave him before he returned to the gym was there. At that time, the protagonist was organizing his things to go back to the gym. That's when his grandfather arrived with a bag and said he could take whatever he wanted from there. Ban opened the bag and found pure gold. He asked if he could really take something like that. The old man laughs, saying that these are the legacies of his ancestors who dedicated themselves to finding the Tower of Babel. The protagonist thanked him very happily, but soon after they got into an argument because the boy didn't know how he was going to bring all this to the academy. Back to the current moment, the protagonist thinks that fortunately he has the inventory for it. His grandfather always said that gold is valuable anywhere in the world, so he decided to pick up some pieces before going around. Ban notes that the preparations are complete and decides to venture out. A little later he arrives in a city and realizes that even though it is another dimension, the urban landscape looks quite similar. Suddenly he notices some small spaceships flying everywhere. The passersby are also very different from the ordinary people of his dimension. At that moment someone called the protagonist. Two green guys ask who he is and what he is doing here. Ban doesn't have time to answer because the guys soon recognize his uniform. They see that the boy is from the Union Academy. The men immediately pay respect and introduce themselves as guards in charge of the western border of the academic city Ronica. The way the men act draws the attention of passersby around. The protagonist also introduces himself as Ban Yuwon and says that he is a first-year student at the Union Academy. One of the guards asks if he received permission from the director to leave the academy. Ban replies yes. The master said he could explore freely. The guard then says that it is thanks to the hard work of the director and the academy team that the city remains peaceful to this day, so he thanks the protagonist for his presence. The boy. He is a little embarrassed listening to all this. The second guard offers to help the protagonist if he needs it. Since he is a first-year student, he probably doesn't know much about the city or its workings. Ban really understands that he is a great help and asks if men can do it. The man replies yes. This is part of a guard's job, so Ban can feel free to ask anything he is curious about. The protagonist soon points to something that looks more like a flying car and says he would like to get one of those. He asks how much it costs. Moments later we see the boy on top of a floating bike at many kilometers per hour. He is really enjoying the fact that he is out of the gym. The guards watch him fly at full speed. When the protagonist asks the price of flying cars, the guard said that the basic model of the floating bike cost 250,000 ronias. It's quite expensive for them, but not for the protagonist who had several gold bars in his inventory. He took one out and asked if that was enough to pay. The guys opened their mouths in surprise and one of them soon asked where Ban got such a large gold bar. The scene comes back to the protagonist on his floating bike. He discovered that a single gold bar is worth 7,500,000 ronias. Ban doesn't even know how to thank his grandfather for forcing him to bring something like this into this world. Suddenly Eve appears on his arm. The protagonist asks what she thinks of this floating bike. The boy reports that it was infused with Yo and Gue, turning her into a living artifact. The protagonist adds that her name is Lilith, and he hopes that his artifacts will have a good relationship. At that moment the boy begins to repeat the things he has already done today. He has already taken the drink from teacher Yamina. He has already got a friend for Eve, so he concludes that it is time to go back to school. The scene changes to Ban. Light hands him a glass of water, and we can see on his face that he is angry. The boy scolds the protagonist for disappearing without saying anything and now coming back hungover. Ban apologizes. He tells his classmates that teacher Yamina insisted, so he couldn't refuse. Light was annoyed that he was his roommate. He wouldn't have worried if he had been warned before. Yun notices something on his amulet and asks if this badge is the sign of the representative role he received in exchange for drinking with the teacher. The protagonist assumes that he can't say what really happened, so he only says that it's a representative role for having completed the task given by the teacher. Light enters the conversation and says that Yamina is responsible for them, so the group cannot reject any of her tasks. Yun does not think exactly so. She says that if the group needs a representative it should be her. The girl states that she is the strongest among the four. At that moment she looks into Ban's eyes and asks if he agrees. The boy doesn't answer anything, but Light loses his patience and tells the girl that she shouldn't talk like that. They are a group and should support each other, not try to be superior to the other. Light points to Yun and goes on to say that this attitude is ridiculous. Acting like it's better is not good for the group that will climb the tower. Yun is silent. To finish, Light says that he also doesn't agree that she is the strongest among the four. Yun smiles and says that it's a little contradictory for the guy to say that everyone is equal in strength, considering that yesterday he himself asked Yamina if he could climb the tower alone. Ban and Rachel are just watching the fight unfold. Light tries to give an explanation as to why he asked that, but he just stutters. Ban lies tirefully on the table and thinks that his plan to talk to the group about tomorrow went down the drain. Meanwhile, the tension between Light and Yun continues. At first the protagonist didn't want to be the representative of the four, but now he kind of understands why he was chosen by Yamaina among the members of the group. Ban sees Light as someone with ridiculously strong pride. Yun is incredibly self-centered and bound to make enemies, while Rachel is surprisingly good. She doesn't have the personality to lead other people. Thinking about it, the protagonist decides to give his opinion in the group. He raises his hand and says that the representative doesn't necessarily have to be someone stronger. Yun questions why he thinks so. Ban replies that someone stronger will make all the decisions of the group on his own, and the representative's goal is to unite the members. But if he acts like this, he will end up separating everyone. The three look at him, understanding his point of view. The protagonist continues to say that anyway, the president of the class needs to be someone who can offer fair and good solutions for everyone. That's why he thinks he should be the representative. Yun gets up from the table and says that since the teacher has the authority to appoint the class representative, she will accept that he has this position. Ban thanks him. Suddenly the girl's face darkens and she says that honestly the only person she really wants to lead is him. The protagonist asks what that means. She says that she is willing to accept the unnecessary to conquer the tower. Light begins to tremble with anger and wonders what she means by unnecessary. The protagonist tries to calm down and falls on the table tired. Rachel calls Ban's attention and he looks at her. The girl with bright eyes asks where her snake is. She really wanted to touch her at least once. Ban is startled by this request. Later that day, the protagonist met with his class for a trial class. Several of the students were really strangers. They were scattered while the teacher explained the test. The man says that for the first class he thought of starting with a light training session, but as we know the students of the regular admission are unbearable. They tell the teacher that they prefer to fight with the students of the lower admission. Light tells his group that it seems the academy divides the classes based on the students' abilities, and as we can see, Class 1 hates Class 11. At that moment, the stone guy notices a pin on Ban's uniform. He soon recognizes that it is something done by teacher Yamaina. After all, she is the goddess of flowers. The guy is overcome by jealousy and screams fiercely for the teacher to let him fight Ban. The students put their hand to their ear after this deafening scream. The teacher asks Ban if it's okay to fight Erecto. The scene changes for teacher Yamaina. She accesses the information of her students and realizes that at this moment they are in the arena, in a joint task with the special upper class. The woman is scared because there is no way for a class from the lower dimension to be able to train with the class from the higher dimension. Yamaina is worried about her students. She tells herself that she doesn't know who prepared this prank, but she feels that this person did it out of malice. The scene comes back to the protagonist and he apologizes to the teacher, claiming that he is not at the level of these students and does not think he can win. The teacher replies that this is not an excuse. Ban wonders if this guy is trying to help the regular students humiliate the lower admission. He then turns to the teacher and says that it is not an excuse, that's the truth. Ban adds that he was accepted as a special admission student because of his unique ability, not because of his combat skills. The protagonist even says that he has other ways for the teacher to evaluate his ability as a special student, so it wouldn't make sense to force him to fight. The man gets stressed by the way Ban speaks and starts yelling. He asks if the boy is trying to teach a teacher. The protagonist asks if he is not an assistant teacher. The man does not accept this question and takes 5 more points from the ban. In total, the boy has already lost 7 points for not obeying the teacher. Ban takes a deep breath, wondering if this is how this guy is going to play. The next moment, the boy has an idea. He says that it would be better to take advantage of this week as preparation time and do the fight next week. His group is surprised. Everyone is silent while Ban repeats what he said before. The students of the regular admission begin to mock him, saying that a week of preparation seems like a joke. Meanwhile, a girl in a hat sitting on the upper steps silently observes the unfolding of the situation. The students complain that the protagonist is running away from the fight. Someone says that it is obvious that his skill is at rock bottom, that's why he's asking for a week of preparation. The teacher arrives at the height of anger and asks if the protagonist still wants to change the schedule of his class. Ban looks bored, while Light trembles with fear. The teacher then declares that he has a decision. Next Tuesday there will be an official fight between Erecto and Ban. The format will be completely open to the public and the entire academy will be able to watch the live broadcast. Ban comes to the conclusion that in fact the guy wants to make his humiliation a great spectacle. The teacher approaches, saying that it is better for the boy to show his skills, since he asked for this period of preparation. The protagonist quickly interrupts the teacher and answering that he already understood. After that he waves to Erecto, informing him that he is looking forward to the fight next week. The stone guy looks at him annoyed. Ban turns his back and starts to leave. In fact, the protagonist did not want to greet Erecto. What he really wanted was to use his skill to confirm the opponent's stats. And that worked, the boy sadly realized. The level of the enemy, it looks like it's going to be a tough fight. Erect has a high level and a lot of strength. The protagonist believes that if it was any member of his team, it would be easy to defeat this guy. So he regrets being the weakest of the group, but he is determined to defeat the enemy and level up to help his team at the Tower of Babel. At this moment the protagonist approaches the girls and asks why their faces look so gloomy. That's when he notices the absence of Yun. Girl faces the enemy class and says that unlike the representative of her class, she is an expert in combat, then questions if they are not curious to see the skill of an inferior student of special admission. The protagonist realizes the problem that is arising. Yun takes an elastic band to tie her hair while daring anyone to face her. The students look at her with anger in the eyes. Meanwhile, the girl stands in the middle of the arena, waiting for some opponent. The teacher grit his teeth. The protagonist even tries to use his skill on the girl, but for some reason his eyes can't fully comprehend the extent of Yun's strength. All he can see is a dark aura exuding from the girl. There's no way the students of class 1 can't feel her overwhelming aura. At that moment Yun makes the sign with his hand challenging him Erect to fight her. Just like he did with Ban, the students look towards the stone man. The girl's face is terrifying when she says she will crush him. Erect feels a chill run down his spine. Ban decides not to interfere. He notices that Erect is terrified. After all, he was his original target, but now he was challenged by someone he didn't expect, and to make matters worse is a girl used to combat. Anyway, the protagonist thinks the guy will have problems, because if he backs off people will notice, but if he fights he will be so hurt that a week will not be enough for his recovery. The protagonist quickly has an idea and goes towards Yun. He says that he will have a fight with Erecto next week, so if she wants to, she'll have to wait her turn. The girl doesn't understand why he's intervening and asks if everything is okay. Ban confirms and thanks him for the concern, but says he really wants to fight to prove his own skills. Yun is surprised by these words and turns around embarrassed. She says she thought the boy was just a guy who trusted tricks, but maybe he can have a little masculinity. After that the girl declares that she will not fight Erecto, but asks if there is someone brave to face her. No one dares to answer. The girl complains that they were barking so loud a little while ago, but now that a real threat has appeared they are hiding like a dog. Yun starts to walk away when suddenly someone asks who she is calling dog. A man with horns says that it is always the weak who unite in packs, the same ones who pretend to protect their little groups. Yun looks expressionlessly on his face, while the protagonist wonders who this guy is. Even among the special class he seems to be on another level. Light says that this guy is Ortima, a ruler of the Kedius dimension. The protagonist seems confused without knowing who Ortima is and what dimension is Kedius. The friend explains that excluding the Union Academy, there are 10 dimensions with the highest hierarchies. Ortima comes from a family that rules one of these dimensions, which is called Kedius. Ban finally understands the size of the problem. The climate closes 100% between Yun and Ortima. A few minutes later the guy approaches the teacher and asks for something. Rachel asks what the object in the teacher's hand is. Light replies that it is a recording device. They must be filming a public video. The teacher soon throws the object up. The protagonist asks what happens after it is filmed. Light replies that as far as he knows they share everything in something called an intranet, but he doesn't know what that means. Ban quickly opens his system. The friend asks if he knows what an intranet is. The protagonist replies yes. It's a network created by companies or educational institutions to exchange information. At that moment Ban opens AniTube and shows it to them. Rachel immediately finds the channel where the live broadcast of the academy is being held. The protagonist realizes that the professor is doing the will of the students for higher admission, but is confident that the guy will not have his glory. At that moment Yun and Ortima face each other, both exuding an oppressive aura. Yun calls the guy a newbie and says he will let him take the first step. Ortima raises her hand in her direction and decides that she will end this arrogant attitude. The next moment the man orders her to kneel. A strong power catches all the students and they feel their bodies getting out of control, as if he is being forced to kneel. The protagonist realizes that it is a type of power that is out of his reach. Some students can't stand it and falls to the ground with the pressure. Ban sees his body conflicting with his brain. It seems that his body wants to obey, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Suddenly Ban widens his eyes and says that this power is a distortion of natural law. Light soon asks if he has discovered what the principle of this ability is. The protagonist is about to answer when he feels someone grabbing his arm. He turns around and sees Rachel, then asks what happened, but the girl starts shaking as she looks at the overwhelming power in front of her. At that moment Yun increases his energy and destroys Ortima's power. Everyone is impressed. They thought Ortima's skill was the strongest in that location. The opponent praises Yun for eliminating his power. He teases the girl saying that apparently she has some ability. Yun replies that he can't say the same about him. After all, Ortima's power is as ridiculous as his horns. The guy laughs and tries to attack with the same power again, but the girl wastes no time and runs at him prepared with a kick. Ortima is surprised by a real combat. Yun asks if the guy really thought she was going to be waiting for him to concentrate to attack her. At that moment Ortima is hit and thrown back. He starts to prepare a spell on his hands while thinking he should be more attentive. Suddenly Yun appears behind him and says that the guy has to work his body more, since her brain doesn't work. Ortima quickly turns with his hand to attack her, but Yun was faster and landed another kick to her face. She mocked, saying that he was terrible at fighting. The guy tries to hit Yun in every possible way, but it's in vain. Light is shocked to see how overwhelming Yun is. She is defeating the commander of a dimension easily. The protagonist says that it seems that that guy is used to suppressing and defeating the opponent using the distortion of natural law, but this method did not work on Yun. That's why he is losing. While they talk, Ortima keeps getting beaten. The protagonist says that the guy is good with powers, but not in real combat. Light is surprised that Ban is understanding the principles of their abilities. At that moment Ortima asks how Yun dares to insult him. The girl asks if he is still able to speak and continues attacking. Suddenly the guy launches a fierce attack with all his power. He ends up hitting the ground, eventually destroying everything. Ortima soon screams with fire in her eyes, saying that he will destroy her. Yun activates the fatal rope skill and prepares to attack as well. Suddenly someone claps and says that it is enough. The next moment Professor Yamina destroys the attack of the two with her own skill. The arena is covered by flowers and the opponents look at each other trying to understand what happened. Yamina says that in this academy students are not encouraged to fight for their lives. She gives an angelic smile and adds that it is better to save this for the tower. After a lot of conversation, the teacher breaks the hallucination of the flowers. Ban is shocked that it is an illusion. He even managed to smell the flowers. Ortima just turns his back and leaves. Yun praises the teacher for being quite strong and retreats to her group. She asks the protagonist how it went. He replies that the girl was amazing and was about to say more things when Rachel hugged him from behind. Ban asks if anything happened. The girl just trembles. He realizes that she is still scared of Yun and tells himself that this is cute. Suddenly their attention is drawn to Professor Yamina. She tells Professor Farrell that he deserves a punishment. The guy keeps his head down while being scolded. Yamina says that he continued even though he knew things could go wrong. Farrell apologizes, but Yamina says that this will not end with a simple apology, so he must be prepared. After that the teacher leaves. She approaches the protagonist and her mood soon changes. Yamina adjusts his brooch and says that he cannot use his gift wrongly. The students are shocked to see how the teacher totally changes her personality with Ban. Yamina says goodbye to the students and leaves. The protagonist realizes that the teacher's intention was to calm things down, but now it seems that she has shaken it even more. At that moment the students look very angry at Ban, as if the boy had stolen something from them. The next day the news about Yun and Ortima's fight spreads. Everyone comments about an inferior having beaten a regular admission student. Someone comments that the first-year students look amazing. The recorded video shows exactly how Ortima had no chance at all. In the video also appears the protagonist and the teacher. The students notice the way she treats him and ask what this boy has. The scene changes to the protagonist and his team. Ban reads some comments from that video and says that the whole world seems to be talking about them. Yun says that there is something very strange about it. The protagonist asks what it is. She then comments that Ortama was the guy known to have the greatest potential in Class 1, but it turns out that she noticed a girl in a hat in the upper corner of the stairs. Yun felt a much greater power coming from this girl. Ban replies that she couldn't notice nothing. Meanwhile, Light says that Ban's name is spread throughout the school community. The protagonist says that he is being targeted because the students are afraid to challenge the true potential of his group. That is Yun. The girl angrily asks if the protagonist knows what the students are really talking about. His name is not being mentioned in anything involving the fight. Ban preferred to act as if he didn't know that people were talking about him and the teacher. At that moment, Light draws attention to Rachel, who is sitting far from them. It seems that the girl doesn't. He managed to overcome the fear he has of Yun. The protagonist doesn't understand how they are still sharing the same room. Suddenly he has an idea and takes something out of the inventory. The boy is determined to make Rachel feel more comfortable. He then takes out a special elixir jelly concentrated in thousands of fruits. It promotes the overall growth in the statistics. The protagonist offers the jam to his friends to spread on bread. Rachel smells it and looks towards the jam. Light and Rachel start eating. They are surprised by the taste and comment that this jam is the best thing in the world. The two devour everything that comes their way. The protagonist looks at Rachel and calls her to join them. In the blink of an eye, the girl approaches with the chair close to the protagonist and asks if he could make one of these for her too. Ban quickly hands her a loaf of bread. She eats it and says it's very good. The fruits are fresh. Light is impressed that this jelly is made by Ban's skill. Meanwhile, Yun asks to eat more. The protagonist replies that she can eat as much as she wants. She says that she feels like she is eating something precious. Ban replies that it is not that expensive. Besides that they are a team. The best thing is to share it with everyone. Rachel continues to eat her bread, all happy. Meanwhile, Yun refuses to eat for free. Even though Ban says that everything is fine, she suddenly gets up and pulls the protagonist by the tie, then says she will personally teach him a martial art in exchange for this elixir. Ban looks on in disbelief with the bread in his mouth. Suddenly, Yun uses her pendant to teleport with the protagonist to a training room. The boy says that they left in the middle of the meal to come here and asks what she will teach. Yun uses a wooden sword and asks him not to move carelessly. Suddenly she runs to attack and Ban is taken by surprise. The sword stops inches from his face. Yun laughs, saying it was an impulse. The protagonist is paralyzed. He notes that it was a movement without an ounce of hesitation or doubt. It's hard to believe that this scam was executed by a human, but it was at that exact moment that Ban discovered a new concept called penetration. The protagonist wonders what it means. At that moment, Yun tries to get his attention and asks him to concentrate. She explains that an impulse doesn't exist in just one form. It can be done with anything. The girl soon shows the most basic and fundamental meaning of an impulse. She makes a quick movement with the sword and pushes forward. She makes a sequence of the same movements and again to the wooden sword near the protagonist's face. Yun finishes by saying that there are numerous variations, but these are the basics. He only needs to worry about making an impulse. The protagonist understands a little of the basic concepts that she wanted to convey, but he also knows that this girl has trained for years, so for her it will be easy. At that moment, Yun asks if he wants to try. Ban replies yes. However, he asks her to be patient because it will be a clumsy imitation. The girl is in the background laughing. She says that she spent years mastering this, so it wouldn't make sense for him to learn so fast. Suddenly, the protagonist surprises her. He makes the same sequence of movements and stops the wooden sword inches from his face. The girl is surprised and wonders how he understood the concept just by looking. On the other hand, Ban believes that he can't replicate the attack completely because so far he has been too focused on mixing concepts. He did it because he thought he could only get stronger by combining them. At that moment, Ban takes off his coat to be more comfortable, then declares that he can get stronger by strengthening his power, so now he feels safe to replicate the girl's fatal attack. Yun is silent watching the series of blows. After that, the protagonist tries to catch his breath and she says that there is no reason to try so hard. Yun advises him to try later when he fights a difficult opponent. Ban agrees. Suddenly several tabs of the system appears in front of him. He realizes that he has just increased his stats just by brandishing the sword a few times. On the first screen, the system says that he has understood and absorbed the concept of penetration. Swordsmanship has also been absorbed as a subconcept of martial arts. The last notification shows that he has learned and internalized the concept of martial arts. The protagonist was very happy with how much he gained in just one training. Suddenly another notification appears informing him that his stats have skyrocketed. The protagonist is shocked because the penetration skill was a concept he just won and is already at level 16. In addition, his swordsmanship did not increase for anything. Ban remembers that he eliminated several goblins and nothing changed, but now his swordsmanship has increased to 20. His combat skills have also doubled overall. The boy wonders how this is possible. Suddenly Yun approaches and complains that he lied to her, saying that he had never practiced martial arts. Ban tries to explain that he really never did. He just did what she had told him and it worked. The girl doesn't believe it and says that if people only learned in the first class, they wouldn't need teachers. The protagonist shakes his head agreeing with his thought, but says that maybe he learned fast because she is very good at teaching. This statement made the girl very embarrassed and her cheeks turned red. Ban goes on to say that for the first time watching her movements, he felt the depth behind them. These words made Yun even more shy. The protagonist couldn't stop praising the girl. She preferred to turn her back so as not to show that she was embarrassed. Ban soon says that anyway he loved her teachings and intends to pay with the jelly elixir that she liked, but Yun replies that this does not make up for what she taught today. The protagonist asks if she is serious and questions what she needs. The girl laughs because her plan worked. She then gives an angelic smile and says that he doesn't have to worry, but makes it clear that in the future he will figure out how to pay her. Ban is surprised because he has never seen such a smile on this girl. Yun soon returns to his normal mood and says that they need to go to the next class. The next moment the girl activates her teleportation and disappears. The protagonist stands there thinking to himself that she can also have an adorable expression. The scene changes to Rachel and Light, both walking through the gym courtyard and fiddling with their cell phones. Suddenly a guy bumps into Rachel and pushes her back. The girl gets a fright. The blue-haired student asks where she is from. Rachel simply paralyzes. The fear is so great that she can't give a word. Light soon intervenes and says that Rachel is in the same class as him, so he questions what the guy wants. The student gets annoyed by Light's sudden intervention and starts cursing. The protagonist and the black-eyed girl arrive at the place of the next class. He says he hopes it's not too late, and she replies that she thinks they are on time. At that moment, the guy who was trying to pick a fight starts to leave and tells Light to be careful. The protagonist asks his friend what happened between him and those guys. A little later, the group attends the class. The teacher says that the history of the Unio Academy does not begin when the director founded the school, but from the moment the tower appeared in the primordial dimension. Suddenly someone takes a picture of Rachel. Those same guys are also watching the class. They comment among themselves that this girl shouldn't even be here. The one with blue hair says that he would give a queen's life if she decided to marry him. Rachel feels these looks from afar and feels uncomfortable. Ban and Light are also bothered. The protagonist gets angrier because the teacher doesn't do anything. With the tone of voice of these students, it is impossible not to hear what they are saying. Ban thinks for a moment and wonders if the old man is ignoring them or can't hear them. Suddenly Light loses his patience and calls the teacher's attention. He complains that the other students are making noise and it is difficult to concentrate in class, so he asks if the old man can do anything. The teacher asks the students not to make noise and soon after returns to teach. Ban and Light do not believe that this is all the man will say. The delinquents start to say that Light is nothing but an idiot. One of them comments that he only couldn't get Rachel's number because this guy got in the way. Other questions if they are a couple. That's why this guy is interfering. The one with blue hair says that the girl has a nice body and maybe is his type. As the conversation unfolds, Rachel's expression is one of horror. Light grits his teeth in anger. He even breaks the pencil he was holding. Ban puts his hand on his shoulder and asks him to calm down. Light questions how the protagonist can be calm when these delinquents are saying these things about his classmate. Ban asks if his friend is planning to fight them, then says that he doesn't have time to waste on useless things. Light is surprised to see that his friend considers it useless. The protagonist then pulls out his cell phone and says that fighting in class will make everything worse, so he calls his friend to see this. Light realizes that Ban is watching a live broadcast on ActionToon again, this time from their room. He asks what that means. The protagonist reveals that he will solve the problem. He is doing this broadcast himself and expects all the students to hear what the delinquents are saying. Light is shocked. Ban laughs frighteningly as he says that the idiot's conversation is being recorded and exposed at this moment. The guys keep talking like if everything was right. Meanwhile, Eve holds a small camera behind the boys. Suddenly, several negative comments about the action of the delinquents start popping up on the protagonist's screen. The guys are being called idiots and disrespectful. In addition, they also spoke ill of the tower. Someone asks if the teacher won't do anything. The protagonist of his group carefully observes the negative comments, which for them is positive. Yun praises his intelligence for doing this. Light is also pleased. Yun asks if Ban put the title of History of the Union Academy to reach public opinion and possibly the superiors. The protagonist replies that he wants to make sure the guys are ruined. Rachel watches everything that is happening. Suddenly one of the delinquents asks what kind of comments are these that he is receiving. The trio soon realizes that they are being recorded and the blue-haired one orders them to look for the camera. The protagonist is silent in his corner. One of the guys finds Eve, but when he approaches she disappears into thin air. The blue-haired one assumes that this setup was made by Light. At that moment the teacher approaches with anger in his eyes and asks if this group is the same one that was making noise before. He then orders everyone to leave. The guy argues saying that he is trying to solve a problem. He was recorded without his permission. The teacher doesn't care about this and yells that everyone should leave. The next moment, the old man expels the students with his power. The teacher turns to the rest of the students and says that this group will receive F for a whole year. So if someone wants to have the same fate, just disrupt the class. Ban realizes that even an assistant teacher has enough power, but he still thinks that an F is not enough from what they told Rachel. Light is also not satisfied. At this moment Rachel finally speaks. She gives a gentle smile while thanking the boys for defending her honor. Girl also adds that this punishment should be enough. Ban replies that he really didn't do much. He doesn't think he's that strong, and that's why he thought of another way to deal with the situation, so there's no need to thank him. His friends gave a smile pleased that everything worked out. The next day in the training arena, the protagonist's team had the bad luck of practicing in the same arena as the group of delinquents. While Light was called, Rachel hides behind Ban in fear. The blue-haired guy approaches and Light asks what he wants this time. The leader calls him an insect and demands that he explain what happened yesterday. The red-haired one says that thanks to that damn broadcast yesterday, his semester score is ruined. The guy in the mask adds that now they are being avoided even by his friends. The protagonist looks around and notices that the teacher is sitting. This one also looks like he won't do anything. The blue-haired guy gets annoyed and asks what the boy just said. Light quickly changes his mood. His eyes turn black. He then agrees to repeat and calls everyone barbarians. The group goes crazy and interprets this as the worst swearing in the world. The leader pulls a knife close to his face and starts trying to embarrass Light, saying that he is from a lower dimension. Suddenly a sword flies by and lands gracefully in Light's hand. The protagonist and the girls are surprised. System soon notifies that Ban has discovered a new concept. The sword exudes an intimidating yellow power. The blue-haired guy begins to tremble. Light brings the sword to the enemy's neck, who surrenders and kneels on the ground. The protagonist realizes that his friend has totally changed. His aura is different. It seems that Light is overflowing with anger. Ban wonders if all this is because of that sword. He also remembers that his system has discovered a new concept. At that moment Light says that it is good that the guy has recognized his place. Meanwhile the leader realizes that he still cannot move his legs because of the pressure. His friends try to do something, but they are also afraid. Light calls the teacher and asks what kind of punishment a person receives for suddenly attacking his classmates with real swords during class. The man thinks for a moment and confusedly replies that the academy encourages practical fighting, so to some extent the group of delinquents is not wrong. Light replies that this is not exactly what he asked. The professor then says that he removed a personal artifact. Light presents his defense saying that he was only defending himself from an enemy attack. The old man says that there is no way he can deny that he released his energy first. Light replies that this was his means of avoiding damage. The protagonist watches the scene closely. The blonde asks how the teacher intends to deal with the insults that the students made to him. The man thinks for a moment and then says he didn't see any of this. Light grits his teeth in anger and decides to finish off the guy with blue hair. Everyone looks horrified, but suddenly he is stopped by a pat on the forehead, given by Yun. Light complains and the girl tries to explain that he is not as powerful as he thinks, so he can't go around acting like this. The protagonist is happy that Light has really been stopped. Meanwhile, the teacher leaves angry. Ban talks to Rachel about how dangerous it all was. On the other hand, Yun continues to berate Light. A little later the group meets in the cafeteria. Ban comments that he thinks they will never be respected, especially the teachers who always seem to protect students from higher admission. He remembers that he even has a fight scheduled because of one of these teachers. Light trembles as he says that maybe they can think about trying to improve the situation based on how Ban solved it last time. The protagonist is against doing this because last time there was almost a bigger problem. Yun eats his jam while the boys continue talking. Ban tells himself that Light's current way is very different from what he saw in the arena. It was as if his friend had suddenly changed, as if someone had pressed a button, and there was still that intimidating sword. At that moment the protagonist tells Light that he wanted him to be honest. Ban asks if his friend can control the power he showed before. Light gets up from the table and starts to say that he can control himself. The boy claims that he only did that because he got angry with the lies of the professor. Ban asks if that was all there is to it and says that lies really are bad, but he is not sure if he should believe that Light can control that force. The friend asks the protagonist to trust him and assures him that nothing like today will happen again. Yun says that this is a relief. She believes that things could have turned out very badly if he was not stopped. Light lays her head on the table after hearing so much criticism. Yun tells Ban that she is starting to feel the advice that Teacher Yamina gave a few days ago about the regulars. The girl believes that if they continue like this, school life will get more difficult, so as a representative she thinks that the protagonist should think of something for their future. The girl says she is willing to listen to him. Ban is taken by surprise. He remembers that over the last few days while living school life, he definitely began to realize what was bothering his team, the mentality of superiority based on birth or strength, and especially the strange contempt directed at the lower dimensions. Thinking about it, the protagonist wonders what outsiders like them could do in a place where these things are considered common sense, with no idea what to do. He asks the group what they think needs to be done to gain the favor of a wide and unspecified group. Light replies that he believes that conversation can bring people together. Yun, on the other hand, thinks that power is more effective. Ban replies that they are both wrong. He then makes the camera sign to the group and says that what he needs to gain the favor of a group is his appearance. The next day the group meets again. Yun asks if they are really going to make a channel that shows their daily lives. The protagonist replies yes and adds that where he comes from is a very common way to build relationships. The girl understands that what they need to do is build an image and show it to the general public. Ban takes the cell phone while Rachel helps with the lighting. He says that when you build an image in people's minds, it creates a sense of familiarity, so it can help the group. Light asks why they have to act out if they are looking for respect and admiration. Ban replies that it is not a staging, it is a real combat match. At that moment Yun asks Light to concentrate. The two start fighting. Yun comes out ahead. Ban and Rachel follow the fight happily. Light tries to get up. Yun starts to mock him, calling him weak. She says that it makes sense why he was so impressed with that strange artifact last time. The girl then encourages him to draw his sword if he needs strength. Light hears this and grits his teeth in anger. Ban continues recording with his cell phone and says that things are going very well. Rachel looks at the fight a little scared. She doesn't understand how this can make their school life easier. The protagonist replies that he won't change things immediately, but it will have an effect. The fight between the students continues fiercely. Ban says that he intends to show everyone that his group is not something they can handle. Anyway, it's not good to worry about the results yet. At this point, the protagonist tells Rachel that her beauty is too precious for her to stress about things like this. The girl is shocked by this unexpected compliment. Ban says that the girl is more beautiful when she smiles. She has a face that can conquer anyone wherever she goes, so it's a shame to waste it on worries. Rachel hears this and gives a shy smile. She feels that whenever Ban says something, this thing will happen. Meanwhile, back to the fight, Yun asks where the guy is running and says that so far it was just warm-up. Light begs the protagonist to save him, since that day Class 11 has followed Ban's recommendation, recording everything from his day, even a bad soup he ate. All the videos were posted on their channel called Rebellion. The response was more than positive. The audience began to follow the day-to-day. They watched the fight and wondered if it was real. The protagonist also recorded the entertainment of his team with some games and even some conversations with teacher Yamaina. In addition, viewers always begged to see Rachel, claiming that she was very cute. The audience was loyal and always entered to see the videos, until one day the Rebellion channel posted an event, informing that the next day her group was going to start climbing the tower. As we saw in the previous video, Class 11 followed Ban's recommendation and all the videos were posted on their channel called Rebellion. The protagonist also recorded his team's entertainment with some games and even some conversations with teacher Yamaina. Viewers always begged to see Rachel, claiming that she was too cute. The public was loyal and always came in to see the videos, until one day the Rebellion channel posted an event, informing that the next day his group would start climbing the tower. The next day, the protagonist screams that he can't believe it. The Rebellion channel gained more than 1,000 subscribers in just one day. They celebrate their popularity while teacher Yamaina watches them. She praises the class, saying that they were very smart. No student thought of creating entertainment content, and not even she would think about it. Ban is even happier that the first training video has become so popular. Yamaina says that this is very good and asks if they are remembering that today is the day to climb the tower. The students kept this information in mind and have already worn comfortable clothes, except for the protagonist, who was still in his school uniform. Rachel suggests wearing something that helps with movement during the battle in the tower. Ban hadn't thought about it because where he lived there were no specific clothes to fight, so he adjusts the tie of his uniform and says he feels comfortable anyway. Yamaina says that if everyone is ready they can go. She creates a portal and they are teleported to the tower. The class is quickly recognized by the other students as members of the Rebellion channel. They look surprised at the famous group. Meanwhile, Rachel seems worried about the place. Yamaina says that this is the entrance to the tower and has nothing to worry about. The tower has been open for a few hours, but the order of entry is by series. Just wait in line. The protagonist is happy that they are the first to enter. Yamaina says it's thanks to their visibility. At that moment, Light's attention is directed to a group of boys and he realizes that the guys are not happy with his presence. Ban says that it must be a group of fans who also subscribe to the channel. Yun says he can see that there is not only a look of admiration here. Someone is exuding a murderous aura. Yun calls Ban's attention and he says he already knows. There are only 4 days left for the duel with the Erect. The hatred that the opponent feels is visible, so Ban knows that to win within that time he needs to reach a level that Erect has never reached. The teacher gathers Class 11 and says that the time has come. She wanted the exploration of the tower to end before the weekend to ensure the safety of each one, so she asks if they know how long they will stay inside. Ban asks if the group has any changes and they answer that the plan is the same. The protagonist holds the robot camera and tells the teacher that Class 11 will spend 2 nights and 3 days. They will return as soon as possible. Yamaina wishes everyone good luck and the students are covered with a light. Ban says that his ancestors can hope for his victory. The scene changes to the past. When Yamaina gave some instructions to her students, she realized that they were wanting to film inside using the autonomous artifact. Ban intended to record the situation inside the tower. That small robot was also a self-operating camera created following in the footsteps of Eve and Lilith. Rachel is delighted with the little one. Light checked the information in the interface and asked why it is says that the internal structure of the tower changes. Yamaina explains that each floor is called a room, and when you clear the room or overcome the traps, the space itself moves the challengers to the next room. This means that the more changes, the farther they are arriving inside the tower. Also, they will not be able to go back to the previous room. Each time a room changes, the monsters that appear are different and stronger. The same goes for traps. Yun was drinking her tea comfortably when something appeared in her mind. She asks what will happen if any of them are murdered inside the tower. This was the doubt of all the students, but they didn't have the courage to ask. Yamaina gives a smile and says that this is a critical question, but they don't have to worry because all the challengers eliminated in certain areas reappear at the entrance of the tower. Light and Ban breathe a sigh of relief. The protagonist asks if they will have to start from the first floor again if that happens. Yamaina replies no, as soon as they enter the tower. The student ID will register the shift, so they can go back where they left off. She shows the pendant and says that this is why this student ID is so important. They should not forget to take it. Light and Ban are confident, while Yun remembers that the teacher said earlier that in some areas of the tower it is impossible for students to be eliminated. She asks if there is any challenging area where students are more likely to be murdered. If this is true, it means that the tower does not guarantee safety. Ban had not thought about it and looks with interest at the teacher waiting for an answer. Yamaina is forced to praise Yun's cleverness. She informs that there are indeed areas and situations that will put their lives at risk. It is impossible to return to life if they are eliminated in these places. The scene changes to the current moment. Class 11 has already started to climb the tower. The first monster is called Claw Sister. It is a kind of slime that devours all the challengers' equipment. Light divides several in half with his sword. Yun attacks on the other side with magic. Meanwhile, the protagonist tries to apply the same strategy he used in other dimensions, but for some reason he can't extract the concept from that place. Yun asks if everything is okay and Ban replies that he just lost concentration. She remembers that he asked for time to find out something and asks if he succeeded. The protagonist replies that he was trying to extract this flame, but it didn't work. Yun says that it would be good if he could extract the concept from the tower. Ban asks her not to try to guess her abilities in advance. At that moment, a giant slime appears behind Yun about to consume her. The girl did not notice the presence and needed the protagonist's help not to be devoured. A current flies and destroys the monster. Yun recognizes in seconds that that chain is Eve. The slimes are defeated in seconds. She didn't know how the snake would act on the battlefield and is happy with her performance. The protagonist says that it can be noisy and Yun says that it can't be louder than that. At that moment, Ruchel attacks the enemy with his claws, causing destruction throughout the area. Yun managed to find a noise bigger than Eve's. She says that the basic of the battle is to hide and avoid detecting the enemy, but no one is obeying. Ban defends Ruchel, saying that her fighting style is completely instinctive. Ruchel and Light continue to attack the monsters while Yun complains about the noise. A few minutes later, Light warns that room 1 was cleaned and it was very easy. Suddenly Yun feels a dark energy building up and warns them not to let their guard down. Light asks if she sensed the presence of an elite monster, and she replies that maybe. The boy then asks for help from Ban. The protagonist quickly activates the infinite reading eyes and says he waited a long time for it. He looks around and shouts Ruchel's name, saying that the obelisk is up front. Without thinking twice, she uses her claws to destroy the stone wall. A cloud of dust comes out of the collision. Light is impressed. Ruchel knocked down the obelisk before the elite monster could fully materialize. At that moment, Ruchel takes the monster's enhancement core. The protagonist thinks this attitude is suspicious and tries to talk to her. Ruchel's hair color changes, causing fear in Ban. The girl looks at him with innocent eyes while holding the core. Ban asks why his hair color has darkened. The girl is silent. He realizes that Ruchel used the heart furnace. It's a burning ability, emotions as fuel to gain power. The protagonist thinks that the scarier Ruchel looks, the more her hair will change color. At that moment, the girl approaches and asks if she looked like a monster. Ban smiles and says no, she seemed quite trustworthy. Ruchel is not sure if she can continue. Yun enters the conversation and asks why she is so worried about losing control. If this happens, everything will be fine because she will be murdered before she even causes any damage. Ruchel begins to tremble in fear. The protagonist finds it funny but tries to calm the situation. He says that Yun cannot do that because they will have to go back to the beginning of the tower. Yun replies that if Ruchel loses control, the three of them will be forced to go alone. She thinks it would be better if only the protagonist accompanied her in the exploration. Light feels rejected and Ban doesn't want to leave Ruchel out. He tells her that he will find a solution to this. Abandoning her is not an option. The girl is happy hearing this and grabs her hand. The protagonist is embarrassed and says that he is only doing the job of leader of the group. Yun complains that Ban is too kind and Light tries to calm the situation. At that moment a portal appears and they are teleported to room 2. Light doesn't feel much difference from the previous room because here there is also moss and weeds. Ban analyzes the core of the elite monster that Ruchel eliminated. The demon's stats were even good, without thinking twice. The protagonist copies the concept of statistics and applies it to himself. Ban imbued fusion in his sword and also fed Eve. The snake's strength suddenly increased. Yun sneaks up to praise. The protagonist yells saying that she shouldn't approach like that. Yun suggests that he train his senses more so as not to be scared around. Light interferes in the fight and warns them to be careful. The monsters in room 2 are about to appear, so it's best to take the situation more seriously. At that moment Light can't even finish speaking because he's attacked by a red mist, luckily. Yun's senses are fast and she uses magic to cut the attack in half. The monster is an evil spirit that targets the magic of humans. Light says not to let your guard down. Yun suggests letting Ban take care of all the combats in room 2. Light and Ruchel are against it because it is too dangerous. For Yun it is a great idea, since the protagonist has a duel next week and this would serve to improve his skills. The girl manages to leave Ban unanswered. He stretches and says he will take care of it. Light tries to stop his friend saying that it is too dangerous, but Ban replies that Yun is right. It would be a waste for the three of them to wear themselves out while he just watches. Ruchel and Light accept the protagonist's decision, but Light makes it clear that he will interfere if there is a problem. Ban thanks him, then calls the black-eyed girl and says that he will use energy, then expects her to help later. The girl smiles and says that she is sure he will stay alive even if he tries too hard. At that moment the protagonist raises his hand forward and calls Eve. The snake turns into a weapon and starts shooting at the entity. The evil spirit tries to resist the attack. Meanwhile Light is enchanted with the weapon and wonders if it is a piece of equipment from the protagonist's world. It seems too powerful because the speed that destroys the monsters is superior to the sword attack. Light does not understand how the protagonist has it because only soldiers from his country could be armed like this. He's sure that those metal bullets could handle second-rate assassins and even first-rate assassins. Yun is also surprised. She deals very well with martial arts, but she feels that the protagonist's attack equals her skills. The negative part for Ban is that he doesn't have much perception, then he can be caught off guard by an attack in a blind spot. Yun was right because at that moment the evil spirit appears on the protagonist's back. Light and Ruchel run into his direction screaming his name. Ban notices the attack in time and takes his sword. The quick cut ends the evil spirit. Ruchel is relieved as Light asks where this sword came from. Ban's new artifact is a long sword with the best stats that could exist in that tower. Light has never seen the protagonist fight with a sword and praises the way he handles. Ban replies that it's not as good as Light and Yun. The black-eyed girl is happy hearing this. The protagonist goes back to destroy the clones left by the evil entity. Eve keeps shooting. Ban uses the sword to divide the spirit into several parts. The duo finally clears the second room. The protagonist hopes that this was the last. Eve binds the last spirit with the chain, and the protagonist decides to rest a little. The monster gains a few more minutes of life, because if it is eliminated now another room will appear. But the challengers want time to think better about how they will act. Yun notices by the remains of the last clones that Ban is already using the skills he gained in the previous room. She also realizes by the way the protagonist fights that he has not lived a life involved in battles. This arouses her curiosity even more because Ban is evolving very quickly, so Yun tries in every way to find out what skills he has. Meanwhile Light and Ruchel praise Ban's control during the fight. Yun says that his performance was good. The protagonist is surprised because he didn't expect to be congratulated by the girl. Yun says that he wielded the sword much better than other fools. Light realizes that this insult is for him and starts yelling at the girl. They both fight and the protagonist takes the opportunity to take a drink from his inventory. He starts drinking while saying that his group really is amazing and didn't rest even at break time. At that moment the three look at him without understanding where he got this soda from. Yun accuses him of drinking it all by himself, and the protagonist defends himself by saying that these things also sold outside, so anyone could have bought it. Light uses a scary look to say that they are now thirsty. Ban returns the drink to the inventory and says that it should only be used when the one who cleaned the room is tired. Yun opens a smile and says that he can leave room 3 with her. The protagonist is against it and the girl says that she wants to try that drink he brought. Light decides to go to the next room room before. Another fight breaks out between them. The last evil spirit is eliminated and a portal appears under the challenger's feet. Ban closes his eyes and checks his internal stats. It's much better than he thought. It's now about average for a Union Academy student. Swordsmanship techniques improved when he picked up the sword in room 2. The protagonist decides that what he has to do now is improve his swordsmanship more and more because he will face erect in the next training. Maybe increasing the level of martial arts is enough to defeat the enemy. Although erect is much higher than him, Ban comes to the conclusion that he cannot close the gap between his level and erecto, so what you can do is count on Yun's help. It is more important to nurture the skills you already have than to create others. When it comes to growing in martial arts, there is only one person who can help you. At that moment, the protagonist mentally asks Yun to help him. The boy does not know how to ask her for this. Yun is one of the best when it comes to martial arts, and that's why the protagonist feels intimidated to ask her for something. He comes to the conclusion that he won't be able to do it, and now he thinks of a second alternative. Ban is so lost in his thoughts that he doesn't hear the voice calling his name. Light starts screaming as loud as he can and the protagonist finally wakes up. The friend starts telling him to get out of it. Ban looks around and realizes that he is falling. He despairs and asks where the floor is. Rachel also screams as he falls. This time a part of the floor of the third room is made of spearhead. Ban calls Eve and manages to use the chains to hold Rachel before she falls on top of the blades. The protagonist is also held by his artifact. He realizes that the trap was created exactly at the point of fall and feels a familiar sensation. At that moment Yun tells him to be careful. The protagonist looks surprised at the girl who is upside down on the ceiling. Yun says again that he will be hit if he continues in this position. Suddenly Ban hears a blade noise. The walls of room 3 open and spears fly towards him. The protagonist wonders what he is going to do. He doesn't want to let Rachel fall down there. The girl starts screaming. In the same second Ban calls for the 2 artifacts. The chain holds Rachel and Ban takes her in his arms. Lilith appears. The protagonist apologizes for shaking the girl too much. Rachel replies that everything is fine. Suddenly another noise comes out of the walls. Again the arrows are sent. Light counters the first attacks with an axe, then jumps and swings the sword cutting the spears. The boy is also using his wing artifact. He doesn't understand why he found such a dangerous trap in room 3. Yamina had said that the traps wouldn't appear until room 20. Surely something went wrong. The difficulty suddenly increased. At that moment his attention is drawn to Ban. Light wonders where the protagonist got another artifact from. Meanwhile Lilith advances at full speed to change the direction of the attack, but Ban realizes that he is not working and thinks of another alternative. Rachel takes the opportunity to hug him tighter. The protagonist is taken by surprise and blushes. The arrows continue traveling and one hits Lilith. Ban decides to do some maneuvers to get out of the vision of the attack. He manages to gain time and Light approaches praising his new artifact. The protagonist soon asks what these wings are. The friend replies that he has a question to ask first. He asks if this thing is also from his world. Referring to Lilith, the protagonist replies that it is a floating bicycle, then notices the disappearance of the 4th member of the group and asks where she is there. Light replies that it's been a long time since he's seen Yun and assumes that she's already fallen into some trap. Ban doubts that she's been caught so easily. In fact, Yun is attracting all the arrows in an opposite direction. Light asks again when he thinks this attack will end. The protagonist read in a manual that there is a time for challengers to resist and pass the level, but he doesn't know the exact duration or how it works, so he asks Light to investigate one side while he looks at the other. The two separate and the room opens new walls to attack. Ban tries to identify the pattern of activation of the traps when he realizes that all the arrows are aiming at Light. The blonde boy was the first to move, then the protagonist notices the pattern of the trap. He was the first target along with Rachel because they both moved recklessly. Ban starts calling himself stupid while the girl notices the arrow on Lilith. The protagonist pulls the arrow that managed to hurt his artifact and says that he needs to tell everyone to stop unnecessary movements immediately. At that moment the arrow in his hand begins to disappear. Ban is surprised, wondering if he was able to read the concept of this thing. It's strange because in the first room it didn't work. The boy tries to find a reason when suddenly something comes to his mind and he decides to test if it really is a coincidence. Ban takes the sword that was on the ground and as soon as he touches the sword it also disappears. The concept found is decapitation. The protagonist was right to read the concept, however the concept that appeared now is completely different from what he thought. Suddenly Rachel draws his attention to Light, who was caught by surprise by a giant wave. The blonde boy manages to escape from the water and blames himself for letting his guard down. He imagined that only swords and arrows came out of the traps. At that moment moment Light felt his vision starting to blurry and assumed that there was something mixed in the water. The roof opens and more arrows are pointed in his direction. This time, Light knows he won't be able to answer the next trap, so he leans on his sword waiting for the worst to happen. The protagonist quickly leaves Rachel behind and advances with Lilith towards Light. Rachel was left alone because Ban was going to risk everything to test if his idea was right. He apologized and said he couldn't drag her into it. Rachel accepted and hoped he would be fine. The protagonist touches the water and activates the concept of acid and wave. A golden light comes out of his hands and he says that he already understood why the concept absorbed earlier was decapitation and not sword. While Ban tests his idea, Yun finally returns to the center of the room. At that moment she sees the protagonist at an absurd speed and breathing fire wherever she goes. The goal is to get to Light. The protagonist considers that touching any substance at the moment it manifests determines the concept that can be found. That's how he found the concept of decapitation in the sword. At that moment a rain of sharp arrows fall on Light. The protagonist screams that he will deal with it. He activates his infinite reading eyes and Light sees a light appear under his body. The guy recognizes that he is the protagonist and is afraid of him being hit by the arrows too. Ban focuses on the concept and raises his hand forward, trying to read the intention of the projectiles. His reading portals are quickly pierced by the trap. Lilith and Ban get closer and closer to the trap, leaving Light scared. The protagonist tries to absorb most of the evil energy that has in the projectiles to break their shape, and they lose their objective. Several swords and spears begin to disappear. Ban holds all energy in his hand and the next moment an explosion happens. It was exactly as he planned. Rachel feels the pieces of the projectiles disappear and celebrates, happily realizing that the protagonist succeeded. Ban finally lands on the ground with Lilith after the attack was interrupted. Light runs towards him asking if he is okay. The boy takes a deep breath and says that it was too close. He holds the orb in his hands with all the power left from the projectiles. Light is surprised that he has directly interfered in the trap and asks if it is a new skill. Suddenly the conversation is interrupted by another attack. This time it is so fast that the boys have no time to escape. Thanks to the girls the attack is stopped. Yun and Rachel jump on them to defend them from the arrows. Yun scolds the protagonist for continuing with this reckless habit. She said that he will get into serious trouble if he doesn't stop it. Ban awkwardly thanks the girls for their help. Yun tells Light that he kept getting into so many problems and even lost focus again. A portal appears under the feet of the challengers and Rachel is relieved that this was the last trap. Meanwhile Yun and Light start a new fight. Deep down Ban finds it funny the way they always have a disagreement. For the same reason and cursing, he is happy because in the end the group helps each other when it is at risk. It is proof that the team is working well together. Yun confesses that she was waiting for the right moment to act. Light and Ban are surprised. The girl then reveals that she only did it because she wanted them both to be indebted to her. So she leaves. Of course she will charge in the future. Ban saw that his feeling of camaraderie was just an illusion. Before a new fight they were teleported to room 4. This time the ceiling is lower. The protagonist is glad that at least they will not be attacked from above as before. While the group talks a dark mist forms behind them. Ban notices and quickly uses his gun to shoot that thing. However, nothing happens to the enemy. Light screams that they are spiders from the tower, a unique monster that appears in any room of the tower regardless of level. The protagonist realizes that they are good because they perfectly dodged Eve's attack. Light puts the sword in front of his body and says that it seems that in this case a weapon is not effective enough. The spiders in the tower are random and there is no way to predict what their weak point is, so he asks Yun to help this time. The girl replies that she will take care of it. The protagonist gets angry because he did not expect that such strong monsters would appear in room 4. Yun orders them to stand behind her and tells Ban to watch closely because it will show him what he is looking for. The black-eyed girl casts a spell on her hand and sends a blast of energy to the spiders. Opponents are consumed and thrown. Some screams are heard and Ban looks surprised at the blast of energy. Yun's attack was stronger than Eve's bullets and left most of the spiders knocked out. The protagonist appreciates the skill and Yun says he will leave the rest to him. After all, he doesn't want to take all the credit. Ban asks Light to protect his back and Rachel to watch the ceiling in case something happens. Then he approaches the spiders with the sword in his hands. The protagonist understands that Yun let him finish off the enemy because he knows that he wants to recover the concept. In the end she doesn't seem to be such an individualistic person. Ban performs the first attack, leaving Light and Rachel worried. The opponent is so strong that the protagonist cannot lower the sword over his body. Suddenly the spider's eyes turn red and it tries to attack. Ban retreats and then picks up forward momentum, hitting the enemy in the head. Light and Rachel are relieved. On the other hand, the protagonist considers that attacking and retreating is not the best option because more spiders are appearing. Suddenly he remembers something and calls himself an idiot for having forgotten it. Ban takes out of his pocket the orb he took from room 3 and says that now is the perfect time to use it. The orb with the level 20 slash ability is imbued into the sword. The artifact evolved immediately after it had perfect compatibility with the user. The longsword had a significant increase in its stats. Now the protagonist carries the most powerful artifact to destroy those spiders. This time just one cut is enough to defeat the enemies. Light can't hide his surprised face. Yun just watches in silence. Meanwhile, the protagonist seems to notice something strange. He thought the cut would come out cleaner. Light notices the spiders accumulating and calls Rachel for help. Yun is almost sure that for a brief moment the protagonist has imbued something into his sword, since now he can cut through enemies that he couldn't touch before. The power of Ban's sword is overwhelming, and he also seems to have improved his swordsmanship. His skills have been improved without relying solely on his power. All of this was noticed by Yun. With her considerable duels, she understood that normally, when someone strengthens their weapon or gets a powerful sword, it ends up swinging like an idiot. Unlike Ban, who adapted quickly, the girl thinks that if it continues like this he will achieve the true essence of cutting on his own. She didn't want to interfere in that sequence, but felt that it was a waste to use that amazing sword with weak spiders. Yun became known as the greatest prodigy in the martial world after overcoming the 3 calamities, but now she thinks she is stupid for standing in front of someone whose talent makes her past seem pathetic. Deep down, Yun doesn't feel like stopping the protagonist, so she makes the decision to make it her own. Suddenly Ban feels a bad energy on her back and looks from one side to the other looking for the enemy. Light asks what happened and Ban replies that he felt some goosebumps. Yun stays behind as if he had nothing to do with it. The protagonist asks if she won't use the energy blast again, and the girl replies that he's better acting alone. Then Ban says that she won't get that drink. Light finishes the last monsters and says relieved that the place has finally been cleaned. Meanwhile, Yun and Ban fight over the soda. Suddenly everyone is interrupted by an external message that arrives in the system. Yun asks because something like this has arrived now. The 3 challengers stay together while Rachel looks at 2 portals that appear in front of her. Light seems incredulous at the message asking everyone to leave the tower. The protagonist fears that something has gone wrong to make this sudden request. Yun says that the message came directly from the director and adds that he doesn't have a good feeling, but he doesn't intend to leave the room until someone explains the reason for this message. Suddenly Rachel squeaks and Ban looks back scared. The portal is finally noticed and they see the amount of spider. Now Yun realizes the reason for the director's emergency message. The challengers have no choice but to retreat. Yun takes the teleportation pendant and they have the bad news. The student card is simply not working. Ban yells that they are imprisoned and Light remembers something that Professor Yamina said about a phenomenon where even students can be murdered permanently. At that moment the spiders begin to emerge from the portal. Light and Rachel are the first to advance in the middle of the deadly battalion. Ban does not believe that the teacher's prediction is coming true. Yamina said that there would be a high probability of dimensional pirates invading. The protagonist did not know what dimensional pirates were and she summarized by saying that it was an invader. The problem is that his abnormal invasion causes an irregular phenomenon. This means that if an irregular phenomenon happens, the academy cannot guarantee the safety of the students. All the rules inside the tower are distorted and areas that were safe become dangerous. The number of monsters multiplies uncontrollably and thousands of other problems appear. That's why Yamina asked them to keep in mind that if this happens the academy can't interfere. Getting stuck in an irregular phenomenon is the worst thing that can happen to a challenger. Unfortunately, the teacher's words turned out to be real. At this moment the group faces great difficulties to get out of that tower alive. The alternative they find now is to escape to a larger space. They are chased by the spiders and Light warns that he does not know how long they will continue to come. Rachel and Yun see that the spiders have already entered the same room as him. There are so many that Yun says that these things seem endless. She raises her hand and launches a blast of energy. Lightning strikes opponents and they are thrown. Light prepares the sword and asks the girl to continue the attack. The protagonist notes with interest that dozens of spiders have already been murdered by Yun's hands. Light is also making an effort. Certainly the two will be quite worn out if they act alone. At that moment Rachel uses his claws to attack the spiders. Her hair is already almost all consumed by black. The protagonist knows that Rachel avoids talking about it, but if her hair changes completely it will be a nightmare scenario. Ban wonders what the worst case is. Her thoughts are interrupted by Yun. She refers to Ruchel as Beast and says that the girl is losing control, but they can't reject Ruchel's help because it's getting more and more dangerous. Ban takes the soda out of the inventory and tells her to drink. He tells Yun to rest while he goes to hold those things. The girl can't hide her happiness at receiving that drink, but she asks if the protagonist is sure he can handle it. He laughs at this question and then takes the pin out of the grenade. Ban tells her to look carefully and throws the explosive at the invaders. Ruchel and Light stop for a moment. The grenade glows during the air raid. After an explosion takes over the place, Ruchel and Light are forced to retreat. Light asks what this power is and the protagonist replies that he tried hard to create this thing. He asks his friend to rest a little because now he is going to attack with Ruchel. Since the girl seems to still have a lot of energy, Ban decided to leave Ruchel because she is too unpredictable to trust. In addition, it is necessary for Yun to rest because more monsters may appear and she is essential. The protagonist advances towards the spiders with Lilith. Suddenly the system interface appears, notifying that the bloodthirsty poison of the executioner's longsword has increased to 15. Ban is surprised because he had done nothing with the sword. The system adds that he vaguely understood the concept of cutting and the depth of the cut has reached level 2. At that moment the blade of the sword turns red. The protagonist does not know how strong this bloodthirsty poison is, but decides to test it. He handles the sword from side to side, cutting the invaders. Ban is impressed by the trajectory of the sword. Now it seems to reach much further. The protagonist continues the attack while thinking about what just happened to his sword. He assumes that the bloodthirsty poison extends the range and distance of the attack. The negative part is that the sword consumes a lot of red liquid from the protagonist. He realizes that he can't use it often. Light soon asks what strange aura is emanating from the sword. Ban changes the subject, asking where Ruchel is. He is informed that the girl is exterminating some monsters. Maybe it's better to help her. The protagonist tries to stop Light from going, but he replies that he's already rested enough and can help. In addition, it seems that the battalion of spiders has decreased. Yun agrees that the flow of monsters has stopped. Light says that normally when a monstrous wave stops, it's because he lost the battle or something stronger is about to appear. Ruchel continues the attack until she realizes that there is no longer any spider. She stops for a moment and another portal forms. This time the boss spider appears. The protagonist gets angry because the teacher said that monsters like this only appear in room 50. Yun asks if he still hasn't realized that everything went wrong. The protagonist walks towards the boss and is held by Light. Ban asks him to focus on the elite that is ahead, but the boy says that he doesn't just have a high-level monster to deal with. The protagonist asks what he is talking about, and when he turns around he notices another boss spider behind them. Now they are surrounded by 2 elite monsters. Light despairs while Yun drinks his drink quietly. The protagonist realizes too late that Ruchel has lost control. The girl attacks the monster head-on with her claws. Light worries and Ban says that maybe it's better then. Asks his friend to accompany Ruchel on the front line. While he and Yun go to attack the other monster, Light agrees and runs towards Ruchel. Ban holds the sword wondering what he will do. He thinks that to start shooting down the big monsters it will be necessary to use bloodthirsty poison. Ban can't come to any decision and Yun realizes, so she says that he knows he can't win, but he still refuses to ask for help. The girl gets very close to the protagonist's face and says that he's very proud. Ban is embarrassed by the approach. She returns the drink and says that it is not bad, then pulls the sword and says that she will want more of this, even if the cost is high. Yun faces the monster. Ban is surprised that she is unsheathing the sword. Normally she can do everything with her bare hands, so he doesn't understand why to use a sword now. He assumes that the girl is trying to teach something. Yun says that he just doesn't want to get his hands dirty, so he shouldn't be fooled. Ban is embarrassed by the misunderstanding. The truth is that the protagonist was right. Yun tells himself that he hopes a single move is enough for him to understand. Lightning comes from the sword and she asks Ban to watch carefully. The protagonist couldn't focus on the girl because he heard a familiar noise. He looks towards the second spider and realizes that Light is going through trouble. Ruchel has really lost control and is preventing Light from defeating the monster. The girl pushes the blade with her claws. Light ends up falling and Ruchel turns her attention to the monster. She looks completely out of control. The protagonist sadly realizes that everything has become a mess. Yun calls his attention and asks if he's not paying attention to her. Ban tries to tell her what's going on and the girl interrupts him. She says that everything will be fine if he focuses on her. At that moment Yun lowers the sword and the enemy is split in half. It only took a single swing of the sword down, a simple move performed by the martial arts prodigy girl. The protagonist felt that the swing of that sword could divide the world. Yun finishes the attack and Ban's system appears, displaying his achievements. The protagonist instantly understood advanced techniques and his power control increased. Thanks to the skill he managed to understand understand a part of a very powerful and complex martial concept. Now the depth of his soul has reached 390 and martial arts has reached 97. The protagonist realizes that Yun is so powerful that just a glimpse of her martial art was enough to increase her stats. The system doesn't stop notifying. Her swordsmanship has also taken a big jump in points. The protagonist assumes that Yun has enhanced this attack. The concept he learned is too deadly to bear. Ban wonders how a person can infuse something so murderous into his sword. The protagonist gets lost in his thoughts, and Yun tries to talk to him. Suddenly she gets close to his face and asks if the boy was able to see it carefully. The protagonist gets scared and she asks what happened. Ban scolds her again for getting so close when he is distracted. Yun changes the subject and hands the spider core to him. The protagonist finds it suspicious for the girl to give it to him since she was the one who defeated the monster. Yun replies that it is a reward and advises him to accept. Suddenly Light yells for the two to stop flirting and come help him. They must hurry up because Rachel is going crazy. The girl just climbed on top of the spider. The protagonist didn't think she would lose control like that after her hair turned dark. Yun says that Light looks completely useless. The poor boy got caught in the spider's web. She says that the best thing is to leave Light there and wait for Rachel to finish him off. The protagonist says that only one person can stop Rachel. He looks at Yun and expects her to do something, but the black-eyed girl replies that she has already done her part in the work. Ban knows how to make her change her mind and says that they are in the middle of an irregular phenomenon. This means that if any of them are eliminated, there is no way to guess what will happen to the rest of the team. Yun realizes that he is right. The girl begins to stretch and says that she will keep that beast entertained while they deal with the spider. The protagonist celebrates that his plan worked, but his mood soon changes when he realizes that he will have to defeat the spider. Yun casts a spell near Rachel's face to get his attention and then says that he wants to have a lot of fun with her. Rachel is enraged after almost being hit and jumps towards Yun. The black-eyed girl laughs that he managed to get her attention. Rachel destroys the ground after his landing and tries to hit his claws on Yun. The attacks were unsuccessful and the martial artist knocks Rachel to the ground. The girl screams in pain and the ground below forms a hole with the impact. Yun stands in front of her, asks if she's still full of energy. Rachel is getting angrier and angrier hearing the girl refer to her as a beast. The protagonist realizes that things are getting tense. Yun yells that it's not time to be distracted. Ban agrees with her and looks at her own problem ahead. He doesn't know exactly how to overcome this. Yun asks if Ban correctly saw his first attack and he asks what she wants to say. Suddenly the spider tries to hit him. The protagonist retreats in time and Light asks if everything is okay. Until that moment the spider was already well injured, but still had the energy to fight. The protagonist tells himself that he can't lose to an injured monster. Eve appears from the portal in the form of a chain and traps all of the monster's paws. Light asks how he tied the spider. Yun hears this and turns to see what's going on. Rachel realizes the distraction. Meanwhile Ban takes advantage of the fact that his legs are immobilized to add bloodthirsty poison to the sword. The blade takes on another color. The protagonist handles the attack within his range. Light wonders if this will work. Yun thinks the attack is too low. To eliminate it has to be above the head. Ban realizes too late that the range is too short. In addition, the bloodthirsty poison was not activated correctly. The sword has some flaws. At that moment, Eve's chain begins to give way and one of the legs escapes. The protagonist realizes that he has no choice but to use both cutting and bloodthirsty poison skills at the same time. Suddenly the spider attacks and a flash of light appears in the middle of the collision. Yun looks afraid of the worst having happened and Light screams the name of the scared protagonist. The thick dust dissipates slowly. Ban manages to reduce the impact by protecting himself with the sword. He falls to the ground. Holding his arm, the protagonist thought he would not resist the moment the spider attacked and changed the angle of the blade. If he had received that damage head-on, both the blade and his arm would have been broken. The protagonist does not know how he managed to act so quickly. It seemed that that fraction of a second stretched for an eternity. He soon remembers the attack that Yun asked him to pay attention to. The system notifies that he has mastered the concept of flooding by dodging the enemy's attack. He realizes that it was that blow of Yun that influenced his swordsmanship. The boy leans on his sword to get up. Ban didn't understand that she wanted to awaken a hidden skill in her martial arts. He thought that Yun was just teaching him a move out of kindness. Thinking about it, the protagonist decides that he will reproduce his attack. He positions the sword in front of his body and says he will try again. The spider uses his legs for a new attack. Ban soon moves the sword sideways sideways. Light watches curiously and has a familiar feeling of this movement with the training of yesteryear, where martial artists redirect the enemy's attack to the side to stop a damage. If everything goes well, it can even open up an opportunity for a counterattack. This technique is not used much because most people are hit even before getting the counterattack. Light fears that Ban is one of those people, so he hopes that everything goes as the boy planned, even if he has never wielded a sword before. At that moment, Ban notices a retreat from the enemy side, then lowers the blade with all the pressure forward, then moves towards the side of the spider and uses the sword to redirect his paw. He continues making the same movement until he gets space. Meanwhile, Rachel continues the fight with Yun. The girl prepares her claws. The black-eyed girl easily dodges the attack and puts her foot down for her to fall. Rachel stays on the ground and Yun turns her attention to the protagonist. She realizes that Ban is using the essence of flow instead of the technique she taught. Essence of flow is a martial art created in the central planes to deflect the opponent's force. Most artists don't use it because it has a high chance of going wrong. At that moment, Ban manages to hit one of the spider's legs. Yun admires the effort and risk he is going through. Anyone in his place would be using simpler techniques. Yun has always dealt with more domineering techniques, but now she finds it very interesting to observe what Ban is using. Suddenly, Rachel squeaks, calling her attention. Yun realizes that the girl has finally calmed down. Meanwhile, Light continues to ask for help to get him out of that web. Yun ignores the requests and looks at the protagonist, thinking that he will not win if he continues like that. She waits for Ban to deflect the opponent's force and counterattack with equal force. At that moment, the protagonist picks up momentum and swings the sword at the enemy, then combines two skills. The blade displays a golden light. The protagonist jumps above the spider's head and lowers the sword with all his strength. Light opens his mouth in shock and Yun celebrates. The opponent is cut in half. Ban sits on the floor tired. The system praises him for synthesizing the internal concept with the external concept and creating a stronger concept. The protagonist breathes a sigh of relief, telling himself that he succeeded. His stats have increased. Suddenly, the protagonist is taken out of his thoughts by a voice asking for help. Light reminds him that he is still in prison. Yun says that he can take care of the beast. Ban replies that they want a lot from someone who just took down an elite monster. Light apologizes for asking too much. On the other hand, Yun complains about Rachel's resistance and says that he would rather be tied up with that idiot. The blonde boy feels offended. The protagonist says it's a great idea and calls Eve. The snake materializes in his arm and he asks to absorb the concept of the spider web that tied Light. The next moment, Eve absorbs the orb and turns into a chain. Now the protagonist picks up Eve and throws it at Rachel. The girl is arrested and tries to resist, but it's no use because the chains are reinforced with magic. In addition, the chains will get more stuck if he tries to escape. Rachel continues to resist and ends up in an uncomfortable position. At that moment, Ban thinks indecent things looking at the girl. Light covers his friend's eyes while saying that he shouldn't look at it. The protagonist asks if it's okay for him to see this and Light changes the subject because he was very embarrassed. Yun realizes that the room has not changed even after the monsters were defeated. Fortunately, the chains were efficient in calming Rachel. The protagonist warns everyone that the student ID card is back in operation. It is better to take the opportunity to get out of here. Everyone agrees when suddenly a voice speaks to them. A frightening energy begins to accumulate and the voice asks if it was these children who passed the test. The four challengers are paralyzed, feeling the pressure exerted by the energy. The voice says that she came to leave the reward. The energy transforms into a woman and she says that she will give the group the opportunity to make a contract with an observer of 10,000 eyes. Meanwhile, outside the tower, Yamina waits for her students anxiously. Suddenly a teleportation portal appears in front of her and the challengers leave. Several stones are thrown with the impact. The protagonist tries to understand if everyone is okay and Light asks where they are. Yun says that this is the entrance to the tower. Yamina goes to them and checks if they are without injuries or sequelae. The teacher is very worried. The protagonist reassures her, saying that everyone is fine. They are observed by other students who recognize the group that owns the rebellion channel. Yamina confesses that she was worried because no one left with the evacuation notice. She asks if something happened inside. The protagonist looks at the group and they are silent. Ban doesn't want to say what Rachel did and asks the teacher to go to another room first. A few minutes later, the challengers arrive at a place to talk privately with Yamina. Ban tells them that Class 11 was caught in an irregular situation detention after entering room 4. He doesn't understand how it happened right at the beginning of the tower, so he asks if there was something outside. Yamina gives the sad news that a student unfortunately was eliminated by an outside intruder. The group widens its eyes in disbelief at what it heard. The teacher says that the academy is taking care of the situation, but the challengers of the same team have not yet overcome what happened. The irregular phenomenon was exactly due to this event. From the beginning, the pirate dimension was targeting new students. If the students lose their student card as soon as they are murdered, they will not be able to be resurrected and will be trapped in the tower forever. Ban asks what happened to the invader. Yamina replies that they escaped. Yun finally joins the conversation and says that this seems to have been planned. There are many invaders trying to climb the Tower of Babel. For intruders, it is the perfect opportunity to do this when the new students are entering the tower, so they can assassinate the talented new students who pass the Academy's esteemed entrance exam. They damage the prestige of the Academy and gain qualification as climbers. Maybe this is the reason for the invaders to take the student card. It is proof that the Academy has failed. Yun adds that on the other hand, the Academy will make an excuse saying that enduring these intruders is just another ordeal that freshmen must overcome, dodging responsibility. Yamina is saddened by Yun's words, but the girl does not change her statements. For her, the Academy no longer makes sense. There are invaders who blatantly invade the tower that is the very essence of the Academy, and the Academy cannot prevent its own students from being murdered. The girl adds that now the claim of being the best Academy among all dimensions seems ridiculous. Her teammates prefer not to interfere because deep down they agree that Yun is not wrong. Yamina tries to say that the girl is misunderstanding. She defends that the academic union always protects its students, but from the moment they enter the tower, the responsibility ceases to be the Academy. They also can't prevent the invader from entering. Yun can't deal with this answer. She thinks that once again the Academy is shirking responsibility. The girl takes her student ID out of her pocket and says she won't stay here. The teacher tries to stop Yun from leaving, and even so the girl teleports. The protagonist tells Yamina that she needs to understand Yun. Something unpleasant happened inside the tower. The teacher asks him to say exactly what happened. Ban doesn't know how to say it and starts stuttering, explaining that something appeared before they left. Yamina asks what it was. Light and Rachel are still silent and trembling with fear when remembering the situation. The protagonist says that they have found the constellation. The constellations are transcendental bosses that observe numerous dimensions, and when they find someone they form a contract. These transcendental beings exert influence in that dimension. They give powerful magic and special abilities, as well as artifacts, but they demand a lot in return. Even so, there are few who refuse. The offers of the constellations are undeniably attractive. Yamina is surprised, and the protagonist assures that the observer of all the sites used a strange voice to talk to them. He promised power in exchange for the fulfillment of their orders. Suddenly Yamina screams that this is amazing. Ban does not understand the reason for the joy. The teacher says that it is very lucky coming into contact with a constellator on the first day in the tower means that her talents have been recognized. Unlike Professor Yamina, Class 11 doesn't seem happy about it at all. The protagonist asks what the Academy's position is in relation to contracts with constellations. She replies that the school usually encourages you to take advantage of the opportunity. The tower is the place where the interest in constellations is most concentrated. The teacher keeps saying that this is good news. On the other hand, the protagonist just thinks that it is unbelievable that a place like the Academy has no defense against intruders. Suddenly the teacher interrupts his thoughts and asks what exactly the observer of all the sites ordered. Ban replies that it was murder. Mood quickly changes and the teacher thinks it is a joke, but he understands that Ban wouldn't do something like that. Ban says that the contract was basically for them to commit murders against each other. The last one standing would sign the contract. That's the reason for Light and Rachel being silent all this time. The constellation said that they were children of surprising potential, then promised to grant any wish for the two that bring the heads of the other two teammates, Yun and Ban, were the people that the constellation wanted to sign a contract with. She insisted that she would help pass all the floors. Countless promises were made thinking that one of the challengers would accept. Giving up a friend's head in exchange for power was the most lunatic thing the protagonist had ever heard. At that moment Yun stepped forward. Ban quickly called his name and the girl said she wanted to be alone. Her eyes shone brightly in the direction of the constellation. The protagonist protagonist tells all this to the teacher, Yamina is surprised by the girl's courage. Ban replies that Yun used all his energy to drive away the constellation, that superior being just wanted to use them as a toy. The protagonist asks how the situation of the tower will be. Yamina replies that the academy will monitor the roof of the tower on the weekend to catch the intruder, so they can't enter again this week. The protagonist hoped to gain experience during these days to fight with Erect on Tuesday, but now he has been barred from climbing the tower. Anyway, he has no choice but to train alone. The protagonist soon remembers something and materializes his recording artifact. He says he is thinking of reporting what happened in the tower in a report along with the records he captured. The teacher says he can do this and says she wants to get together with the other members of the team to watch together. The protagonist thinks it's not a good idea. The other members are not happy with the school management in abandoning them inside the tower at the risk of their lives, so they don't want contact with anyone from the academy's disciplinary committee. In addition, everyone is physically and psychologically exhausted. Yamina says that she understands and will strive to make sure that nothing like this happens again next week, so she hopes that none of them think badly of the gym. Light says that they need to go rest now. Yamina tries to say goodbye, but Ruchel and Light teleport before she finishes speaking. The protagonist is about to do the same when he is interrupted. Yamina remembers that the Constellator wanted to contract with 2 members of Class 11. She questions if the Constellation specifically asked Ban and Yun to eliminate Ruchel and Light. The protagonist has a reality check when he remembers that this was the request. He realizes that the observer was not just trying to pit them against each other. The divine being didn't want Ruchel and Light to reach the top of the tower. He even referred to them as useless burdens. While referring to the protagonist and Yun as beloved children, the Constellation ensured that they would become the best climbers because he could see the radiant talent of the two. But for that to happen, Yun and Ban needed to finish off Ruchel and Light. A few minutes later, the protagonist returned to the dorm room. Light was sitting on the couch hugging his knees. Ban comments that this position seems uncomfortable and says that he can't even imagine Ruchel doing something like that. Light doesn't react to the joke and asks if the protagonist is trying to provoke him by saying that he is unmasculine. Ban assures that he never thought of something like that. Light says he knows. In fact, he just wanted to vent. Light refers to himself as trash and says that it's not even worth insulting someone like him. The protagonist didn't expect to find the guy so depressed. Suddenly Light says he hates the protagonist. Ban replies that he hates him too. The protagonist decided to say the same thing as his friend to break the mood a little, but it didn't help and he asks Light to be direct about what he's feeling. Ban doesn't mind hearing it even if it's just a complaint. Light starts the outburst by telling that he was one of the greatest talents in the world he was in. It may seem like an exaggeration, but it is not. His family and everyone admired his techniques. The king entrusted him with the sacred sword. Everyone was sure that he could obtain the power of the Tower of Babel and would become the final guardian of his dimension. Thanks to the support, Light came to the academy full of expectations. But everything changed when he heard that Observer treat him as a useless burden. The protagonist thinks that the words of that thing should not be taken seriously. Light replies that Ban only thinks so because he was chosen, but he is just a spectator of the two who were chosen by a divine being. These transcendental beings are much stronger and more knowledgeable than humans, so he asks how Yun and the protagonist could so easily reject their offers. Ban realizes Light's frustration. The fact that he refused is because he finds this type of proposal absurd. He is not willing to get stronger by eliminating his comrades. Light still thinks that the protagonist only thinks so because he has overwhelming power, but he probably wouldn't have been able to reject as firmly as Ban or Yun. Light would hesitate to eliminate his friends, but is not sure if he would keep that choice. So now he feels resentful and cannot forgive himself. A little later that night, the protagonist finishes taking a shower and realizes that Light has gone to sleep, so he heads to bed. At that moment, Light calls his name and apologizes for whining like that. He only acted that way out of jealousy. The protagonist smiles hearing Light apologize for taking out his frustration on a friend. He takes some hot chocolate and leaves it on the table, then says goodbye saying that he will go out for a while. Light thanks him and the protagonist leaves the room. He feels that Light has changed a lot since the first time they met. At that moment, Yun is passing through the hallway when she sees the protagonist. She takes the opportunity to get close to his face once again and says that now she doesn't need to invade his room. Ban jumps back in fright and asks what she's doing in the boys' dorm. Yun makes a sign of silence and says that it's not a problem if no one finds out. Ban tries to resist and is dragged to a safer place. They both sit on a bench between the male and female dormitory. Yun asks how the burden is. Light would have freaked out if she heard what he is being called. The protagonist scolds her for talking like that, but Yun says it's the truth. For her, Light is nothing more than a pathetic person without talent or adaptability. Ban replies that he doesn't agree. Light is skilled in swordsmanship and also has many other skills. Yun thinks that the guy depends on the sword, his keen combat instinct, and his special skills come from the sword. Without this he will be no different from a useless fool. The protagonist is thoughtful with Yun's harsh words. The girl does not stop saying that Light is a good-for-nothing who paralyzes at crucial moments. Ban is tired of this conversation, but Yun says that maybe it doesn't make sense to stay together. Everything will be lost if one day Light loses courage and spirit. Ruchel is also going down the same depressing path. If it continues like this, there is no more group. Ban doesn't understand if Yun wants to insult them or is worried. Anyway, the protagonist decides to be sincere and says that she is not very different from Ruchel and Light. The girl looks surprised as Ban says that she has been acting strangely since she met the divine being. She even treated the teacher badly. Yun is embarrassed because she didn't imagine that his accusations would turn against her. She asks if Ban discovered this using his skills, and he replies that he doesn't need to. The boy takes hot chocolate from the inventory and asks if everything is okay with her. Yun accepts the hot chocolate as if she were receiving the most amazing gift in the world. She is happy to know that he cared, but clarifies that she only acted that way because she was very angry. Ban asks what made her angry. Yun says it's about that 10,000-eyed observer. She asks if the protagonist shares the same thought and reveals that she thought about discarding Light and Ruchel because she feels that they don't help at all. Ban says she never thought of something like this and asks what nonsense she's talking about. The girl confesses that she would have had a different attitude if she had been moved by the idea of taking only the capable with her. She wouldn't have been able to murder her companions, but she would have let them be eliminated indirectly through negligence. She asks if the protagonist is angry that she thinks about doing it. Ban questions if she would do it, and the girl says yes. The protagonist then calls her an idiot. Yun wanted him to take his deepest thoughts seriously, but realizes that he does not intend to abandon Light and Ruchel, so she asks if the protagonist thinks they both have talent, and he replies that he does. Light wields sword incredibly well. The only problem is that he trusts all his potential in the sacred sword and can't keep up with the situation empty-handed. At that moment, Light is in the room drinking the hot chocolate that the protagonist left for him. Ban also thinks that Ruchel is incomparable, that physical ability and potential she possesses is incredible. The only problem is that she still can't handle the inner emotions, but the protagonist is sure that they can fix their problems on their own. When that day comes, their talent will far surpass anything Yun can imagine. Yun can't help but be happy to see the protagonist excited like this. Then she says she'll trust him. Ban cracks a smile on his face and asks if the girl will help Ruchel and Light. Yun replies that if those two don't overcome their struggles and evolve, she'll take out all her frustration on Ban. The protagonist wasn't expecting that. Yun smiles as she leaves him alone and says that he must work hard if he doesn't want to be punished. Ban tries to understand if he heard correctly, but Yun jumps over the wall and says she will meet him tomorrow. The protagonist could not sleep without a threat from the girl. The next day arrives and Class 11 gathers in the training hall. The protagonist watches with fear because this time Light and Yun seem fiercer. Suddenly the blonde boy is thrown away. He calls the protagonist, who quickly approaches. Light starts crying, asking why the protagonist said he would teach him something and brought him here to take all the blows. Suddenly Yun yells that this is to train his body. It is natural that it is this way. The girl adds that Light does not learn just by observing once as the protagonist, so he must stop whining and stand up. Light says that he wants to use the sword and Yun replies that he will not do that. The first step is to learn to fight without using the sword. Light screams, asking how she dares to take the sword from a swordsman. Yun asks if he intends to give up on life if one day he meets an enemy and is without a sword. The boy replies that he does not, and she encourages him to learn hand-to-hand combat. The protagonist tries to calm his friend. He says he is only doing it to help his growth. Then he asks Light to trust at least once in fighting without a sword. His friend finally agrees. He trusts the protagonist and thinks that the boy would do nothing to harm him. Light gets up excited to start over. The next moment Yun's foot hits his face and she says that he should not leave openings. The protagonist was also taken by surprise by the agility of the attack. Yun continues the sequence of kicks while saying that Light must fix his posture and block the attack. The guy uses his hands to defend himself and feels that everything is too fast to counterattack. Yun asks where his combat instincts are. Ban finally realizes that Yun was not wrong when he said that Light would not know how to fight without the sword. Normally with his strength he could even defeat Erecto, but now he is acting as if he were a novice in hand-to-hand combat. His skills seem to have been expelled. The protagonist wonders if he was blind for not noticing his friend's difficulty. Yun concentrates his punches at face level and taunts Light, saying that he is completely useless without a sword. Light replies that this is not true. Yun says that if he thought like that he would not be looking for the sword all the time instead of focusing on the opponent. Light is so angry that a golden light escapes from his body. Yun looks without understanding what is happening. At that moment the boy tries to attack her, Rachel, and Ban stare at Light frightened by his transformation. Rachel asks if this is his true form. Simply the guy has turned into a girl. The protagonist asks if it's some suppressed power that escaped. Yun is angry in the look. Light's uniform starts to glow brightly and suddenly he falls to the ground. The protagonist runs towards him and Yun stops him, saying that everything is fine, it's not something they can solve. Light goes back to his masculine form and his uniform looks destroyed. The girl with black eyes asks if he knows what the problem is. Light replies yes and says she doesn't want to continue like this, then asks if Yun can continue training him. The girl replies that first she needs to apologize because she misjudged him. Light replies that he doesn't need to, but Yun says that initially thought he was a clueless idiot, but in fact he is an idiot carrying a bomb on his back. Light was tricked into thinking that at least once in his life he would not be insulted. He yells that he doesn't like Yun. Meanwhile Rachel asks the protagonist what they should do. The girl hears no answer and realizes that Ban is motionless. It turns out that his infinite reading ability showed that Light possessed Holy Spirit and Demonic Spirit. The protagonist does not know how such opposite concepts can coexist in one body. Perhaps this was the cause of the explosion. He decides to talk to Light later in the dormitory, then turns to Rachel and apologizes for not hearing his call. The girl replies that it's okay and says she wants to train too. Ban is afraid because of the last experience. Rachel asks for help. She is sure she has the means to contain her power, so she needs to learn how to do it. The protagonist feels intimidated and takes distance. He didn't want the girl to make an effort because the event yesterday was traumatic enough, but he decides to train her on his own and hands her a wooden sword. The protagonist says that it doesn't need to be as intense as Light, just make light movements and gradually increase the intensity. Rachel replies that he understands, but the protagonist is again lost in his thoughts. Before coming to this dimension, he dreamed of going to college. The boy never imagined that his college life would be as chaotic as it is, but he needs to confess that now he is happier. At that moment Rachel doesn't even seem to know how to hold a sword. The protagonist tells her to run up and the girl got it wrong. It took the form of the beast and charged towards him. 5 minutes was enough for Rachel to lose control. The protagonist had to rely on Eve's help. Moments later Rachel's hair returns to normal and Ban celebrates that she is back. She asks how many times this has happened. The protagonist replies that it was more than 10 times and he is very tired. Rachel cries and apologizes. Ban strokes her hair and says it's okay. He prepared in advance in case this happened, so she doesn't have to feel bad. Rachel feels a sinister aura and when she looks at Yun, she screams scared as Yun asks why the protagonist is calmly talking to the beast instead of training her. The girl carries Light by the foot and seems jealous of Ban. Rachel says that the protagonist was helping because he cared about her. Yun accuses the girl of having ulterior motives and says that she shouldn't train with wandering thoughts with her opponent. It's good to forget about it the next time you enter the room. Rachel is silent. The protagonist realizes that the girl always loses her excitement when she talks to Yun. He also doesn't understand how determined she was to train after making so much physical effort yesterday. Anyway, the important thing is that the girl is striving to improve. The protagonist says that he is right and Yun watches carefully what the boy is going to say. Ban says that she received approval to leave the island for a moment and this time she can take a person with him. Yun is sure that she will be chosen and says that it is great because she is tired of staying here. Ban looks at Rachel and asks if she wants to go with him, breaking Yun's expectations. Even Light was surprised, but the protagonist said he wanted a date with Rachel. The next day arrives. Ban waits for Rachel in a store. He is in connection with Yun and Light. The girl told him not to stay late on the street. Light cried, saying that the protagonist preferred to take a girl instead of his roommate. At that moment a voice calls Ban. Rachel says that he tried on the clothes he asked for. She asks how she is. The girl confesses that she has never worn something so short and is embarrassed. The protagonist avoids saying exactly what he is thinking because they are indecent thoughts, so he raises his finger saying that the clothes are good. Yun realizes what is happening and starts insulting Ban, while Light prefers to leave the call before he sees something he can't. A few minutes later, Rachel looks delighted at the city that exists outside the academy. The protagonist says that it is really stunning and adds that now they are going to another department store. Ban walked ahead and did not realize that there were many people in the district. Rachel ended up losing sight of his friend and soon became desperate. The protagonist goes back and touches her hand, asking if something happened. He apologizes for forgetting that she never came here before and ending up leaving her behind. Rachel replies that it's no problem. Ban is embarrassed to say that they need to hold hands so they don't get lost in this crowd. The girl agrees shyly. After that they do some shopping and go to some stores. Both are easily mistaken for a couple, since they are walking hand in hand all the time. They have fun and decide to end the day eating at a restaurant. The protagonist asks if it's okay for her because he heard that the meats in this place are made of monsters. Rachel replies that she likes it. She tries the food and says that it is very good. The protagonist agrees that it is better than he thought. Rachel has been eating his favorite dish since he joined the gym. She tells herself that it is thanks to Ban. The protagonist realizes that she has stopped for a moment and asks if something went wrong. Rachel replies no. In fact, she is very happy to be invited by him. The girl says that today she received several beautiful gifts and is even eating her favorite dish, but she feels that she cannot repay all this. Rachel thinks that she does not deserve to have so much fun because she does not believe that she can control her abilities. She cannot hide that she is insecure. The protagonist has an idea and asks her to look at the orb in her hand. The emotions she is feeling are in her hand. Rachel interrupts the explanation to say that he can't see any orb. Ban decides to summarize it with words. He says that before the girl was very angry and he could feel her negative emotions, but now she is fine and her emotions have changed. Maybe the solution is to create pleasant environments for her. Rachel asks if the protagonist can use the ability to see her concerns. Ban answers yes and crushes the orb, destroying the girl's bad emotions. Rachel is scared and the protagonist promises once again that he will solve her problems. So he wants the girl to enjoy today without thinking about reciprocating anything. Rachel finally feels good. Ban apologizes if it seemed oppressive and she says he wasn't. Then the girl says shyly that she wants to get closer to Ban like her. The protagonist asks who Rachel is talking about. She says she's talking about Yun. The two seem very close. Ban disagrees with that. He says that Yun attacks him whenever he can. Rachel says that Yun scares everyone with his way, but he seems to like the protagonist a lot. Ban doesn't think that's it. In fact, he's afraid whenever Yun touches a sword. Rachel starts laughing and Ban asks what's funny. She says she's relieved now because she thought he was a god who feared nothing. Rachel approaches Ban's face and says that now he feels he can try harder. Then he starts to pull him by the hand, saying that he's going to buy clothes for him too. Our protagonist is happy to see that she has returned to normal. The girl starts running while he takes the bags. Night comes and the scene changes to the academy's meeting room. Yamina asks Ban's artifact to wait a little longer because it's almost over. At that moment someone complains about the videos recorded by the protagonist. The guy asks who allowed something like this to happen in the tower. The teacher with glasses says that precious information is being spread recklessly and suggests stopping him. Someone says that from the beginning they shouldn't have carelessly accepted someone from such a low dimension. At that moment the meeting conductor calls Yamina and says that the autonomous behavior of that student went too far. She must know that this is clearly a violation of the authority of the academy, then asks how the teacher intends to take responsibility. Yamina looks at the recordings and feigns surprise to see that Ban recorded the inside of the tower. The truth is that she thought that the protagonist would not be able to do something like this, since external artifacts normally do not work inside the tower because they are overloaded and break due to the strong magic emitted by the place. But he did something surprising and may not even know it. We can say that that small camera robot did most of the work. Yamina didn't wait for the protagonist to make a tool that works inside the tower, but that's not all. He also publicly posted this video on the channel. Ban's idea was to make Rebellion become famous and and gain the favor of the students of the academy, Yamina tried to make him change his mind by saying that he could spread the information about the tower that everyone worked hard to get, but Ban replied that it was okay to do that because other people would also report their experiences with the other students. He also said that he would hide the information about the constellation. Yamina tried to change his decision by talking about the unpleasant reality of the academy, but the protagonist chose to post the video anyway, even knowing that there would be big repercussions. The teacher warned that this incident could bring big and small changes. The protagonist stood firm and asked her to trust her group. Yamina was a little shy with her courage. She advises the boy to avoid accidents even if he feels safe. Now the teacher was being intimidated by her student's attitude, but deep down she was sure that the creation of the protagonist could result in something immense that transcends the gap between dimensions. The teacher asks if she plans to take responsibility. Yamina decides to support her student, then says that filming and posting the tower video is a personal matter for each challenger. She sees no problem with this attitude, and adds that she doesn't know what responsibility Professor Canton is talking about. The man laughs and says that this statement makes it seem like she cares about that student. The leader of the artifact creation department named Liriana joins the conversation. She asks who this guy is and Yamina replies that he is an ordinary student. The Professor Ryu in charge of Aura's combat studies says that he can't believe it's an ordinary student. The information from the tower should only be for the academy, so it's clearly a violation of the academy's authority. Yamina disagrees because the only reason why no one has filmed the tower so far is simply because they didn't have the artifacts for it. It would be important for everyone to collaborate and try to learn a little of her skills. Cantoni asks her to explain about technology and skills so that everyone can understand. Liriana interferes because she knows that the teacher is losing control. She says that she spent 200 years working on an artifact that could be used in the tower and came to the conclusion that it is impossible, especially precision equipment for filming. Her research showed that no artifact could withstand the mana waves emitted by the tower. Yamina interrupts her and says that Ban managed to do it. Liriana says that it doesn't make sense the student from a low dimension without mana to do something like that. At that moment she notices the small robot and prepares the gloves to study the artifact that filmed the video of the tower. Liriana says she will disassemble it and find out what kind of technology the protagonist used to do it. Yamina protects the small robot and says that she only brought him here because they asked to see her student's artifact, but he can't let anyone touch him. The teachers start accusing Yamina of not wanting to cooperate. Suddenly someone asks them to keep quiet. The vice president of the academy named Xenon says that things can be resolved without scandal. Everyone obeys and is silent. Xenon turns to Liriana and thanks her for the research and effort invested over almost 200 years. The woman is embarrassed by the vice president's words. Xenon asks if she thinks Ban is special and Liriana replies yes. While they talk, the artifact is still recovering from the threat it suffered just now. Canton asks what the vice president is thinking. Xenon replies that the protagonist is the only one in the world recognized by the tower. The other teachers disagree because Ban joined a short time ago and comes from a low dimension. Even if this is the opinion of the vice president, they think this statement is reckless. Xenon replies that he has a reason to think that. Then he asks Yamina to share something from the video so that the teachers understand. Yamina is confused. The vice president says that maybe she doesn't know either, so he will tell everyone. The man speaks loudly that Ban and his classmates from class 11 are the only ones who were chosen by the constellation. The teachers are stunned by the news. It is unbelievable that a rookie was chosen after climbing the tower only once. Yamina asks the vice president not to speak carelessly. Xenon questions if Ban and the other students made a contract with the constellation. The teacher does not know why the man is going so far and denies that her student has made any agreement. Xenon assumes that it must have been difficult to express himself in front of the divine constellation. In this case, it is better to make class 11 watch his lecture. The teachers comment that this is absurd. There is no reason to benefit these students who did not sign a contract with the constellation. The vice president says that he does not care if they closed an agreement or not. What matters is that they have been chosen by the constellation. Surely other constellations will be interested in them after this contract has been refused. That is why he is willing to guide the students chosen by the constellation. He asks if the teachers have any Cantoni. Objections. Certainly no one is against it. The vice president ends by saying that regarding the case of filming, no teacher can prevent something like this from students. Questions and personal requests will be allowed. Yamina is sad. She knows that this meeting, what the vice president wants to do with the protagonist, is not for the best in the class. They are just instructions from the president. Xenon says that any teacher who tries to intimidate the protagonist will be expelled. After that, he says goodbye to everyone, wishing them a great weekend, and teleports. Yamina didn't expect that the protagonist would be able to get to the president so quickly. Suddenly the teacher is taken out of her thoughts by an unexpected invitation. Cantoni asks if she wants to have a drink at the bar to toast her student's success. The little robot doesn't like the idea at all. Yamina simply teleports without responding to the invitation. The teachers make themselves available to accompany Cantoni. The next day, Ban was stopped in the middle of the cafeteria by other students. They were interested in the protagonist's talent. There were so many questions that Ban felt suffocated. Some girls even asked him out on a date. Yun watches the scene from afar and asks why there is a crowd around Ban. Light asks if she remembers the channel they created. They surpassed 2 million subscribers after posting the tower video. It can be said that at this point, it would be more difficult to find someone at the gym who has not seen the channel. Yun does not seem very happy with the approach of the girls and the protagonist, but he understands the interest of the students because he knows that Ban's skills are really remarkable. Ruchel is silent. The protagonist finally meets with his friends and says that this Monday morning is very different. Light says that it must be good to be famous. The protagonist replies that the channel belongs to them too, so if they find any fans they have to be kind. Light agrees. Suddenly someone asks out loud if this noise is because of manipulated images. These delinquents are the same ones who harassed Ruchel earlier. The blue-haired boy says that only low-dimensional people like that channel. He also thinks that the video is manipulated because there is no spider of that size. The horn guy says that tomorrow all these lies will be exposed. Light asks what is tomorrow, and the protagonist replies that it is the day he will fight against that arrogant erect call. It seems that those who are doubting the video are looking forward to the fight, probably because they want to see him get crushed. Ruchel and Light are worried. Yun asks if he is confident to respond in the best possible way to the support of those who like the channel. Ban smiles and says yes. He will strive for tomorrow to be the best event. The next day arrives and the opponents are ready. The teacher warns that the duel will be broadcast live on the official channel of the school. If you agree, just sign the document. The interface appears in front of both and they agree. The rules of the duel are simple. If someone is seriously injured or surrenders, the duel ends. Attacking vital points is forbidden, but the injuries are at your own risk. The protagonist realizes that he can be incapacitated in this fight. Erect calls him and asks if he is ready. He senses that Ban may be afraid and says that the boy can surrender if something happens. The protagonist looks surprised. Then Erect says that he will accept his surrender if he crawls and barks like a dog. Ban widens his eyes without understanding anything. Meanwhile, new spectators begin to arrive in the arena. The unpleasant duo from before already expects the defeat of the protagonist. Ortama is also in the stands and his attention is directed to Yun. The black-eyed girl asks Light how the reaction is. He says that the live spectators have exceeded 10,000, but most are cursing Ban. Ruchel says it's unfair and Yun replies that it was to be expected. That's why Ban has to win. Many people are watching and at best he can surprise everyone. Now there's no choice but to prove that he has talent. Meanwhile, the protagonist is wondering if he heard it right. To him, this phrase of crawling and barking like a dog sounds like it was from a third-rate novel. At that moment, Ban tells Erectus that his words had an effect. Now he will show his potential. The opponent laughs and says that he is acting very calmly. The protagonist turns his back, saying that he can act calmly. He takes the sword out of the inventory and says that Erect can figure it out on his own. The stone guy yells at Professor June to quickly declare the start of the duel because he wants to break this guy into pieces. The teacher starts the fight between the student of Class 1 and the student of Class 11. Erect prepares his fist to crush the protagonist. That student is so big that his steps destroy the arena. The protagonist stands motionless looking at the enemy's fist approaching his face. Erecto is clearly confident because of his size, but Ban knows he can use agility to his advantage. At that moment, the protagonist slides back and jumps towards Erecto's face. He believes that the opponent will not be able to stand out if he is too slow. blow, Erecto is hit in the face with the sword and falls backwards. Ban lands gracefully on the ground. The night after the day that Rachel and the protagonist went on a date, Class 11 got together to talk about the method that Ban would use to face that stone. The protagonist thought of some techniques, but before using it there was a lot of trial and error. Yun advised to use that technique of deflecting the opponent's attack and counterattacking. If you do that, you can say that you totally master the reverse method. She picks up a branch saying that she will attack with different speeds and different shapes, so Ban needs to fight at least once. The protagonist remembers the training he received and tells himself that Erecto is totally different from Yun. The stone guy almost couldn't even touch him. Ban followed the plane and hit the stone man's face, but before hitting infused the sword with wave energy. It was a great attack because that rock-hard body seems to transmit the energy of the waves well. At that moment Erect trembles in anger and screams, asking how he dares to touch his body. The protagonist faces the opponent and asks if he can stop whining and act like a man. Ban manages to provoke Erecto. The guy tries to hit him with that stone hand, but the protagonist dodges. Erecto is being consumed by rage and refers to Ban as a low-dimensional mongrel, asking how he dares to despise him like this. Ban realizes that he really annoyed the opponent. Erect energizes his hand with force magic and says he will finish him off. The protagonist manages to dodge that attack. He thought that Erect would try a different method after being hit for the first time, but acting like this is even better for Ban. Erect continues the attack in the same way without any countermeasure. At that moment the protagonist makes an aerial attack with the sword. He lands on the ground after several precise blows to Erecto's hand. The enemy screams in pain as he feels his arm unraveling.